Nothing that makes us human is physical. Everyone knows that, but it's very little comfort to my soul in its crumbling shell. A glass elevator carries us to the top floor of the New Claris Regional Hospital. Its view as it rises looks out at the city's western limits, where a field of wildflowers blooms between us and the untouched forests. From this height and distance, their shapes and hues blur together into a carpet of colorful foam on a green sea, faintly shifting in the wind. I don't really like flowers. Oh, they're quite the sight right now, but in no time at all they'll wilt, die, and linger as rotten brown husks. Flowers are beautiful because they fade. People who want to sound wise say things like that sometimes, but it's all garbage. They're beautiful right now. They'd be beautiful if they stayed like this forever. If those people were wilting, they'd agree with me. Before long, the elevator comes to a stop with a soft ping, and its doors slide open into a wide hallway. Dad steps out, 2 bags of my luggage in tow, and I follow. I've never been to the 7th floor before. To their credit, they've done a good job of making it look like a real place. The hall is bright with soft ambient light, and it opens into a large space that feels more like an upscale living room than a hospital, with earth-tone walls, a high wood panel ceiling, round tables surrounded by plush seats. Planters line the tall, wide windows, and the air smells strongly of mint. The only immediate sign of where we are is the square desk in one corner serving as a nurse's station. Some of the people seated around the room, a rough split of residents and nurses, look up to watch as we enter. At her age? What a shame. None of them say that, not with words, but I can feel it in their eyes. I've felt it quite enough to know it by now. Ah, is that Liadain? We just heard you be here soon. One of the nurses approaches to greet us. And you must be her father. Yes, Dad confirms. Alban Shiel. Nice to meet you. The nurse briefly glances up at him and down at me as he reaches out to shake her hand. We look nothing alike. Apparently I take after my mother's side. After a moment's uncomfortable small talk, she ushers us down the hall to my new room. Well. This is a nice place, yeah. Dad says, his tone artificially light and casual. Like the lounge outside, its decor is quiet and cozy, with just one thing out of place. The bed is covered with a soft blue quilt in a simple diamond pattern rather than sterile white sheets, but laid over the same thin wheeled frame as those on the lower floors, with a tray table, steel 4-pole, and remote control attached to one side. At least it's the only bed here. Every room on this floor houses a single patient, a small relief compared to some of my last stays. Do you need any help getting things in order? Dad asks. No, that's fine. Just put everything here in the corner. I'll bother one of the nurses if anything comes up. Ah. I'll let you get to it, then. He nods, expressionless, drops his share of bags, and steps back to stand in the doorway. He silently looks over the room again as I start to root through my things. Atop a tightly folded pile of my dresses, the round pink face of Pearl, my stuffed axolotl, smiles up at me. At least one friend is still standing by me through all this. I'll come by after work tomorrow to see how you're settling in, Dad lies. You take care, all right? I have nothing to say to that. He's been doing his best to act like I was going on a fun trip somewhere, and I can't be bothered asking him to quit it. He'll be gone again before too long. Right. I'll show myself out. His brisk footsteps quickly fade from earshot. Just buzz if you need anything, okay? We'll show you around later, whenever you're feeling up to it. The nurse slips out after him, gently closing the door behind her. I've waited to cry, swallowed my pain for as long as I could, and I lose my hold on it as soon as I'm alone again. I set Pearl down beside the bag, out of the way of my tears. 8 months since I last left this place. Modern medicine's best efforts granted me 8 months to live in the world, for all the good it did. Just enough time to have my 13th birthday forgotten by my once friends. Maybe they didn't forget. Maybe they all just decided to imagine that they lived in a world where things like this, things like me, simply didn't happen. I guess it doesn't matter anymore, really. They'll live their lives. They'll find other and better friends until I'm nothing but a sad little memory. I, on the other hand, I'm not sure if I've had a life at all. I spent most of those years in and out of this hospital, pushing through the pain while doctors worked to keep my blood from eating me for just a little bit longer. Now, at last, they've given up. 2 failed transplants was already more than my body could handle. Now the only thing left for me to do is die. The first thing the doctors here asked, when my old treatment team handed me off to palliative care, was where I stood on serving as a test subject for any experimental medicine they came up with. They didn't say it in those words, but that's what they said. There's only one cure for what I have, and that one just failed me for the second time. All that remained were the salvage drugs, the last resorts. They might make what's left of my life more livable, they might kill me sooner, they might even work. Miracles happen, just not to me. The 7th floor is only for the dying, but nothing says I have to promise to die to stay here. Most residents choose the lightest medical plan possible, whatever will keep them moving and getting the most out of their last days. I have nothing to lose and nothing I want to do but live, so I told them to try what they could. I very often regret it. The best they came up with was something to slow my symptoms down and keep me from suddenly getting worse. 3 days a week, for the first 2 hours of the morning, I wait while a clear solution with a name I can't pronounce drips into my veins. By the time it finishes, I'm dizzy and shaking and sick to my stomach, as I will be for most of the day. I wonder why I bother on these mornings. Why put myself through this for the sake of a body that's hindered and hurt me every day of my life, when it doesn't seem to help at all? When in the moment it actually feels like it's making me worse. It's one of those mornings now. I sit by the windows opposite the sun in the central lounge and idly shuffle one of my tarot decks with shivering hands. Mostly, though, I just watch life on the 7th floor go by. Pearl sits to my right on the table, looking out over the room with quiet interest. When I first heard of the 7th floor, I imagined it as a tomb. A cold white place even more bleak than the rest of the hospital, where people laid down and withered away when they lost their last shreds of hope. I've just spent a week here, and I'm still not sure what it's supposed to be. It's not just the decor, the bright windows with their nice views of the city, the fragrant plants in every room hiding the faint but distinct smell of death. If you ignore all the nurses and helpers, the wheelchair-bound residents with their oxygen tanks and 4 bags, it seems like they're doing their best to make this place anything but a hospital. Aside from the nurses' station and a small examining room, most of the floor is set up for social gatherings, hobby groups, even occasional exercise classes for the ones who can still stand. More than that, visiting hours here never end. The ward is hardly bustling, but the comings and goings of faces I don't recognize are common enough that it's almost never just patients and their helpers gathered here. There are technically lists of approved visitors somewhere, but they only ever question guests about whether they have anything communicable. It all reminds me that I'm the only person here younger than 40. The others have lives to leave behind, people who will weep when they die and remember them well. Even if I could find someone who cared, would I want them at this point? We'd have a few months together, maybe a year, and then what? What could I do in that time that would make any of it worth the grief? My old friends were probably right to cut their ties early. A man boards the elevator, helped along by his family. I'm not even allowed to leave. In my current state, catching anything contagious would be very bad for me, and I'm not ready to write myself off and let whatever happens happen. I turn away, pull a card from my deck, and flip it over on the table. The 6 of Pentacles. Gifts, sharing, generosity, and gratitude. In my case, the promise that I can care for myself and get better if I just ask for help with it. I sort through implications, alternate readings, other ideas I might reflect on through this card's lens, and they all bring me back to one point. Thanks. I don't need you lying to me, too. I banished the Six of Pentacles to its deck box and set to shuffling the rest. Some of my books contain strongly worded warnings about how you obviously can't remove anything. You would unbalance the deck and nothing would work the way it should anymore. Well, cards, life has never been balanced, and if you don't want me to cheat you should stop mocking me. Do you read often? Someone is standing by my table. A woman in comfy clothes you might still call stylish, old but not quite elderly. Her gray hair is kept in a neat tapered bob, and her attention is still on the cards splayed across the table rather than me, the lines around her eyes creasing as she narrows them in focus. I'm not sure when she'd appeared there, but then I wasn't paying the closest attention. I've seen her around at a distance. I think she leads the pottery classes in one of the art rooms, but she's the first patient to actually start a conversation with me. Not really well, yes, it's just been a while since I did for anyone but myself. I see. My son used to love all this old folk magic, but he hasn't touched it since he aged out of promise range. May I impose? Not, if you've got it in you, if you're feeling up to doing anything at all today. She just asks. Fine, but I can't promise anything exciting. I straighten my personal deck, tuck it away, and fish out the one I use for other people, scattering it into a messy pile. Finish shuffling these, if you would. I nod to the seat across the table, and she's quick to join me. I've never caught your name, have I? Only that you're one of us who still bothers to wear clothes in here. I don't know how some of them manage, shuffling around in pajamas and gowns all day. She groans theatrically. No reason you should have to act sick. I do love that dress, by the way. Oh, I thank you. I hadn't thought of it like that. I just like that I can still have a say in at least one part of my mornings. The dress is one of my standards, black and white and just a bit frilly, with big roomy pockets on either side. I'm Liadain. Noirin Hearn. Just Noirin is fine. She finishes stacking the deck and pushes it across the table, a spotty patch of rash peeking out from her knit sleeve as she does. All set? No, keep it. It's better if you draw your own cards. Noirin shrugs. If you say so. Everyone's got their own routine with these things, don't they? Where do we start? For now, the same way I do when I don't want to get too fancy. 3 cards, what was, what is, what will be. Is there any one thing you're asking yourself about, or did you only want to keep me busy? She shakes her head. Oh, just an old woman getting a bit nostalgic, mostly. Let's start from scratch and see where we end up. Suit yourself. Pull your first card from anywhere that feels right to you, then. The deck order doesn't really mean anything. Noirin flips the top card and sets it in the center of the table, displaying a picture in muted oil paint colors of 2 riders in a canoe, paddling from a dark sea into a sunlit horizon. 6 blades carve through the ripples left in its wake, each thrust from beyond the bottom edge of the picture and meeting at a point just under the boat, forming a triangle. The 6 of Swords, I announce. The storm and the calm that follows. Loss, maybe, and change, but change leading into something gentler than what you've left. Is this calling anything to mind? Noirin's foot taps steadily under the table. She's quiet for what feels like a long time, her eyes lingering on the boat in the center of the image. Well, when I think of it, like, would you mind if I prattled about my problems for a bit? Go ahead. That kind of comes with the territory. Thank you. Noirin looks up from the card, out through the window with its cityscape view. I've been living here for about 3 months. My family all took it rather hard when I checked in, and it hasn't been any easier for them since. I know, I'm sure that's nothing out of the ordinary, but there's a little more to it. They don't know, never mind about that. She sighs, shaking her head. The short of it is that we're having trouble agreeing on how to spend this time. That's where you're coming from. Your context. From what it sounds like for now, I'll just note that this card can also mean learning from things you can't erase. I gesture to the deck. Whenever you're ready. Out comes the second card, a man scaling a mountain on bars of light jutting out from it like the footholds of a ladder, adding the top rungs by hand even as he climbs. This picture faces me rather than Noirin. She frowns, reaching out to turn it over. Wait, that's supposed to happen. I set 2 fingers to the card, holding it down. The 9 of Wands inverted. See? Is that right? My son never used to turn them over like that. She cranes forward, trying to get a better look at the upside-down image. Everyone's got their own routine, like you said. Her sons probably made him one of those love and light types who thought reversals were too gloomy, but no need to stress that point. An inverted card is usually something out of place somehow, missing or incomplete or overpowering everything else. Right now, this one is a line where persistence turns into stubbornness, or where it falls just short of what it needs to be. This disagreement. It's something you can't compromise on, or don't think you can afford to give up. Well, yes, actually. That's about the shape of it. I'm sure I know what we need, but I expect they feel just as strongly, and as it happens there's no way to do both or take turns. I nod, indicating the deck. To where it's leading, then. Noirin picks up the top card. Before she flips it though, she pauses, considering something, and puts it back, cutting the deck and taking a new one from the middle. The one she sets down is a misty expanse around a small circle, like a little eye-hole in the fog, through which a girl can be seen handing a gold bowl filled with flowers to a boy. 5 more empty bowls are arranged beneath them. The 6 of Cups. Nostalgia. Memories of simpler, happier times. Before I say anything, what are you thinking? That it's odd to see something like that here. This one is meant to be the future. I nod. A pause, then, I'm still not really sure. Fill me in. What I think is that there's a journey here. Across the boundless sea, up a mountain that can't quite be climbed, back to how things were before this entire misadventure started. Maybe not exactly how they were, but the past is never really past, and it sounds like what was important about it is still there for you. Maybe there's a wall that can't be crossed around one thing, but you've still got everything else. If your argument can't be won on either side, and it's not doing anybody any good, maybe you should talk to them about just accepting that, putting it aside, and doing as much as you can of whatever's always made you happy together. I can't be certain about that without knowing the exact nature of the problem. It might be something so huge or awful that there's just no way to work around it, but it's the best I can do. It sounds good enough. Noirin purses her lips and cups her chin as she studies the now complete row of images. She's quiet for a long time. Finally, she looks up at me, grinning warm and wide. I just might do that. Thank you, Liadain. You've helped clear at least a few things up. Oh, I haven't done anything. People see what they need to see, that's all. I'm not going to give the entire show away, but that much is true. Well, if it works, it works. She waves the point off, still smiling. You should do this more often. We old bats appreciate candor, and sometimes we can use a hand being frank with ourselves. So I do. Tarot is only a game I play with decks full of pretty pictures, of course. No energy or will moves these cards. They don't know a thing about you, and certainly not about things to come. As far as I know, prophecies don't exist. Even keepers have never been able to tell the future, not really. So the only force working through the cards is simple psychology, but I still think they're an interesting reflective tool. I've spent a lot of time sitting in hospital beds with nothing better to do than read or browse the Coral Sea, and I learned a lot from sorting through the roughly even mix of genuine insight and weird fomistic nonsense in my tarot books. The ideas you pull from a bunch of vaguely symbolic art say something about what you're thinking, sometimes before you found the words to think it properly. Their value is in what those thoughts teach you rather than glimpses of a future nobody really knows anything about. Plus, once I started regularly setting up shop in my corner, the nurses let up a bit on trying to drag me to activities. I guess telling pretend fortunes is social enough to count. Mr. Enfield owned a seaside restaurant, which he'd managed for most of his life and stayed involved in until he was too sick to possibly work. It looked very likely that the business would leave the family after him. The new generation had all found different callings, and the head chef, his protégé, was offering to buy the place. I've never seen the man visibly worried about anything, bizarre as that is in a place like this, but he'd come to ask about whether his life's work was in good hands. The smiling old man sets his final card on the table with an unsteady hand. The Page of Pentacles. My first reading today has been so straightforward that I almost wonder if the cards really are taking a hand in this one. Almost. This is a stable, successful future in the hands of a rising star. You've built your foundations as well as you can, and they're set to hold strong. Ah, that's a relief. I'm very proud of what we had, but I really ought to have taken my hands off it by now. I want my family to remember me as well as my customers, and nobody looks back over their life and wishes they'd clocked more hours at work, do they? Mr. Enfield lets out a soft, wheezing chuckle. You know, miss, sometimes I wonder if this all wasn't for the best. If what comes next is any variant on "everything happens for a reason, I'll vomit." He keeps on. He wears oxygen tubes, and the words are clearly an effort to push out. I'm sure I've leaned on my kids more than I meant to. About the business, probably plenty of other things too. Goddess knows what I'd give for more time with them, but they've gone their own ways, and that's all right. I have to be all right with that to get the most out of what we've got left. We're together now, we'll be happy for however long I've got, and I don't need to worry about any of that. Things, they find a way to work themselves out in the end. That's what I think, anyway. Sure. Happy to help. I gather the cards, pick up Pearl, and leave without another word. Her eyes open to a dream of children frolicking in their sanctuary. Though her thoughts are as grains of sand passing through a sieve, trickling piecemeal into the vessel apportioned to her, she knows her purpose perfectly well. She looks up to the vast quilt of stars swaddling this world, glimmering wisps twined together by threads of emptiness. Their never-ending dances are of no concern to the her who has awoken here. She thinks only of her goal. Her reason for being. She turns her gaze to the city, a teeming garden of life. Spires in all shapes and sizes are spread out before her in clusters at once chaotic and calculated, sprouting from the earth like flowers of glass and stone. She looks, and she listens. Deeply, subtly, gently beyond comparison. Thousands of hearts beat to the selfsame rhythm no matter how viciously their spirits conflict. A few of these heartbeats rise above the refrain, guiding its melody, and two in particular resound in her above all others. It is beautiful, in its way, but not what she is here for. No, what she seeks is the one new heart beating in dissonance with its own murmur. The song of a soul crying out for release. Mr. Enfield died a few hours later. I don't know exactly what happened except that Dr. Hines, the director of palliative care, was pale and grimacing on his way out. It's just past midnight. I can't sleep, so I've gone wandering for a bit. The lights in the lounge are dimmed nearly to the point of being off, but there's no actual curfew, and at least a few residents always end up falling asleep on the couches after they turn off the TV for the night. The nurses still seem a bit tense, and they don't even give me the usual disapproving looks I get on my late-night walks. For the moment, I sit in my usual corner, looking out at the city. Pearl perches on my shoulder, where she can see over the plants on the windowsill. I wonder if Mr. Enfield still felt the same way when it happened, or if he felt anything at all. Plenty of people his age take naps and never wake up. I wonder about his legacy, too. I'd obviously never met his successor and never planned to. Who knows if anything I told him was true? What will happen to Pearl when I die? Somehow, of all the thoughts and fears swirling around in my mind, that's among the most persistent. Dad won't want to keep any of my things around. I have no friends left, no family I'm close with, no little cousins I could will her to. Maybe Noirin has grandchildren who would like her, but then I'd have to spill my guts about something this stupid to a woman I've known for a few weeks, and she must have her own things to sort out. Plus, how would I trust some kid I'd never met to take good care of her? This isn't helping. I start back toward my room. Splish. Eh. A puzzling noise echoes from just beyond the door to Mr. Enfield's room, like the sudden plunk of a rock being dropped into a lake. Bizarre, these walls are soundproofed well enough. More than that, there shouldn't be anyone in there at all, and what would make a noise like that even if there were? Something in the pipes. Plunk. There it is again, pattering numbingly along in intervals with no pattern I can place. For a moment, I figure it's just the steady dripping of water from a faucet somebody failed to turn completely off, but then it goes silent without the faintest trace of movement otherwise. If I could hear liquid trickling from beyond that door, shouldn't I have heard the faucet's handle being turned to shut it off? Or the steps of whoever turned that handle? Then it starts again. A surge of rapid little taps like heavy rain against a window. My knees tense and my spine stiffens. This doesn't feel right at all. I rap my knuckles meekly against the door and wait a moment. Nothing. Then, after a longer gap than the last, it starts again, and this time, rather than fade, it stretches out, becoming the sound of swishing your hand around in a bathtub, or maybe dragging something through a swamp. I try the handle beneath the electric card reader and find it unlocked. Wait. Just before I crack the door open, my hand shoots back almost on its own, like I'd touched a burning stove. Stop. This is wrong, this is dangerous, these are all the kinds of warning signs they talk about when it happens. A nauseating riot of color surges out from underneath the door, like a second skin festering over it, crawling up its length and spilling out across the floor. It spreads just slowly enough for me to jump back as blotchy ooze swallows the tile I'd been standing on an instant ago. It's hard to focus my eyes on its presence, makes it hard to see anything at all, hard to endure my own senses. The brown of dried blood swirls with living, twisting shades of gray, and parts of the growth bubble like a pool of hot mud. The rain shower in my ears becomes a howling torrent. Like a drum pounding loud and fast enough to split my head open, mingled with the rhythmic slamming of my heart against my chest. I can smell sour air and I want to puke. Just seeing it makes my eyes burn, but I can't look away. Even as the muck rises out of itself, slowly pulling itself upwards, rising above my height, I can't look away. It won't let me. The thing looms over me, a thin shrouded figure sculpted out of wet, oozing clay. It has no face, no features at all. Its body splits down the middle, opening like a mouth into nothing. A dozen thin black limbs like insect legs reach up through the tear, dig into the shredded clay, and start to push. A dark shape crawls up and out of the muck, like something inside is molting. Liadain. Get away from there. A girl's low, even words call out to me, tinged with faint urgency. There's no clear source of the sound. I actually don't think I even heard it at all, just thought it in someone else's inner voice. Whatever it was, it's enough to briefly cut through the haze of panic choking the air. I turn and bolt down the hallway, clutching Pearl as I run. The pounding water rapidly dims, and if the thing is following me, I can't tell. A moment later I stumble through my door, slamming it behind me. I squeeze the doorknob so hard it hurts and lean back, pushing my entire weight into the door. This lasts a few seconds before my legs give out and my socks slide forward, leaving me in a crumpled heap on the ground. It's all I can do to turn my head and press my ear to the door, shivering and choking all the while. This isn't the slightest bit safer, it's still here, still right outside, still coming to. But that doesn't happen. Nothing does. The soft, wet sounds are completely gone. Good. Stay in here and I should be able to protect you. For the moment. I'm still not alone. At those voiceless words, I turn around and look up at another strange visitor. She stands beside my bed, studying my tarot cards where I'd left them on the nightstand. A child? The rough shape is of a little girl in a heavy blue-gray cloak, the color of the sea on a cloudy day. When I see her face, I realize that the girl is very clearly something else. Her skin is marble white, but slick and shining like a dolphin's, with the tips of the thin tendrils that trail down from her head like hair tinged a faint blue. In place of a nose, she just has two nostrils set directly into her skin. She watches me with sapphire eyes that have no pupils, only the thinnest rims of white around solid-colored circles. What is she? Not a keeper, maybe one very deep into emergence could end up like this, but she looks too young for the promise range, and more than that, there's something deeply inhuman about how she carries herself. When her gaze lowers to meet mine, she moves in an eerily fluid, precise way. Her head takes the clearest possible path to exactly where it needs to be, and there it stays, never shifting or blinking. Harbingers aren't supposed to speak, at least not in ways that make any sense, and a harbinger would have eaten me or worse by now. That only leaves. She starts to speak again, and her mouth doesn't move at all. The words come from that same strange place somewhere inside me. There's nothing you can do about what you just saw, not as you are. But you can be more, if you wish. The lectures only ever said that harbingers were terrifying monsters and we'd know them when we saw them. That didn't do them the least bit of justice. The thing in the halls was unforgettable and too awful to remember at the same time. Thinking about it feels like picking shards of glass out of my brain. I do my best to shove it from my mind, but every single line of thought ends with wondering where it is now and what it might be doing. Are you sure it's safe here? Really, really sure. Reluctantly, I look back at the door, trying to keep the girl in the corner of my eye. Nothing is crawling through the cracks. Her gaze circles the room. Her nostrils crinkle like she's trying to place a smell. No. It's very hard to be certain of anything about harbingers, even newborns. She closes her eyes, opens her mouth slightly, and lets out a wordless song in a whale's low, howling voice. The light bulbs above take on a very faint moon-colored glow which scatters into bright flecks dancing along the walls, like sunbeams beneath the sea. After a moment, the song stops, but the tint remains. There, the girl says, again speaking directly into my head. I've warded this room against wound intrusion. That and my presence are the closest things to safety I can offer you right now. Save, that is, for the power to protect yourself. The power. I know the answer, but I can't make myself say it. I don't know what I'll do if I'm wrong. If she's gotten me to hope for something just to dash it a few seconds later, I just stare at her and squeeze Pearl a little tighter. The girl raises her arm to her chest, as if to place a palm to her heart, but there's no hand at the end of it. Instead, the limb opens into something like an undersea flower, 7 pale petals around thin blue stalks. My name is Vuji. I'm a messenger of Clyassia, and your yearning has called me here. She spreads her arms from her hips and bows her head, taking an almost prayerful position. Your soul rejects its foundations. You stand at the boundary of the world, and with one more step, you can move beyond it. You can be a keeper, if you but choose. Exactly what I thought, then. The whiplash of it all leaves me paralyzed. This is happening right now, when I was staring at pure horror, certain I'd die not a minute ago, when I'm still fearing for my life. For her part, Vuji just waits, silent and still. Why me? If you wanted to choose me, why only now? Can you tell me? Do you even know, or is this just how it's done? My vision blurs as the words tear out of my throat. My nails dig into my arms. Vuji tilts her head curiously. This is the first time I've felt your call. The only choice I made was to answer it. That doesn't tell me anything about why. Not many keepers talk about the mystery of what earns them their blessing, but the ones who do say they're messengers don't even seem to understand the question. This is what they mean, then. Because I know you, Liadain. I knew you and loved you from the moment I felt your will. Nothing I can do will change the past, and nothing I say will apologize for the life you have led before now. All I can give you is my word that what comes next may be different. That it will be different, if you accept what is yours. Don't talk about knowing me. Whoever you are, whatever you've seen or haven't about me, you waited what? Were you sitting and waiting to tell me this until I gave up? On everything? What I know, what you would know if you meant that, is that I have nothing. No life. No future. Just the years I've spent making my peace, and now you won't even let me keep that. What am I doing? Has it been so long since anything good happened that I've forgotten how to act when it does? I break down into choked, ugly sobs. Vuji's face falls, heavy with some unplaceable emotion. I am sorry that it couldn't be sooner. Truly, I am. It is a monstrous thing that the world has refused you a place in it, simply for being born. I will not try to justify it, because it cannot be done. Her gaze meets mine. What is that in her eyes? Pain. Remorse. Yet more pity. But I can still help you carve a place for yourself. Please go away. I don't care what she's promising. I can't bear to have her standing there staring at me anymore. The messenger frowns. She watches me, still unblinking, for another silent moment. I can't choose for you and won't judge your decision, but are you certain? Yes. No. I mean, that's not to say no, get out of here and never come back, I need to think. Alone. Do I have to decide right now? Vuji finally looks away from me, a very small mercy. She puts a flower hand to her chin and stares up at the ceiling pensively. There's a pause just long enough that I worry I've ruined everything, but then. No. Sometimes these things are more sensitive, but in your case this is an open offer. I'll note that you don't even need to make the promise to protect yourself or these people, if you don't want to. If you call emergency services and tell them you've just spotted a harbinger, someone will be here to handle it soon enough. This doesn't appear to be an urgent crisis just yet. That said, if it is left alone, it will feed and grow until it becomes one. I have no way to predict how long that will take, so I do suggest that you make your choice quickly. Fine. I don't think it'll take long, I'm just really tired. Will the harbinger be back as soon as you leave? I believe it will look for somewhere more secluded, but it's not impossible. Given that, I would like to keep a distant watch on this floor. If you need time to make your choice, you have my word that unless I have to intervene to protect you from something, I'll leave you alone until you invite me back in. Is that acceptable? My stomach scrunches up at the thought of that filth seeping beneath the crack of my room's door while I sleep and rising up to spill over me. My nose and eyes and tongue burn at the memory of its scent. It'd probably burn my skin just to touch it. My throat lurches as an image forces itself into my brain against my will, that sludge swallowing me whole, dissolving my flesh away until I'm nothing but rotting bones and drain-clogging hair carried away on a current of sewage alongside Pearl's soiled remains. It feels like my heart is dangling right above a pit that's been dug into my chest, and the moment Vuji leaves, it'll be snipped right off my aorta like grapes from a tree and plummet down into the void, taking the whole rest of the night with it in a spiral of shuddering dread as I cower beneath my covers praying the monster won't get me before morning comes. Wait, that's wrong. Grapes don't grow on trees. They grow on vines, right? But I could have sworn I saw a grape tree once, on a school field trip I was well enough to take. So maybe they do exist. I just don't really know. And I realize how weird it is that I know more for sure about the blood vessels connected to my heart than I do about grapes. And the way things are now, it'll always be that way. And I hate that more than anything. I hate the fact that I'm almost too exhausted to be afraid at this point, because if I'm going to die anyway with nothing to show for it, why should it matter if a harbinger kills me tonight or my own worthless blood kills me next week? The truth is, I'm here on the 7th floor exactly because it's already over for me. I hate it. I hate it so much that my jaw clenches shut and my nails dig into my palms hard enough to sting and, without even thinking about it, I raise one of my balled-up fists, pour all the strength in my tiny body into it, and hammer it into the door I'm leaning on again and again and again while the messenger across from me just looks on without saying a word. With just those 3 knocks, my pointless tantrum is already over, because that's all it took to get me panting hard enough that it's hard to talk. That's really all I had in me. Fine, do it, I finally say after I'm done catching my breath. I'd rather not have that chance on my mind. Just don't sit right in here and watch me sleep or anything. Part of me expects that this is one last cruel joke, that I'll be eaten or die in bed as soon as this meeting ends. If she wants to cut off at least one of those possibilities, I'll take it. I tuck Pearl in, but don't join her just yet. My room's windows face east, toward the city. I prefer it to the flower fields on the other side, but not by enough that I spend much time enjoying the view. After tonight, though, I do want to look out over the world beyond the 7th floor, the world I just might still have a future in. At this hour, most of New Claris is lit only by the moon and stars. The night lighting is sparse and carefully targeted. I think that's true almost everywhere by now, but our city was rebuilt with the specific goal of being kind to the planet more recently than most. A few scattered rooms in skyscrapers are still bright, a few homes still active. The main roads are outlined in thin trails of echoluminance, narrow lights cast over rows of reflective trees and shrubs, and the sidewalks and back streets blink with smaller motion-sensing lanterns. I can't clearly see anyone from here, but I can trace their steps by the lights that brighten their paths and vanish as they move on. As I watch them go on their ways, I think about the people who still belong to that world. Mostly I think of the keepers patrolling the city, and what it would mean to be one of them. I've dreamed that dream now and then. Of course I have. Everyone spent their youth hoping at least a little for the day they'd meet a messenger, but while other kids were sketching what they wanted their costumes to look like, I did my research. I learned how rare it was for that day to come. Only a very few children would be chosen, and there was no way to plan or practice to be a keeper, since nobody knew what the messengers were looking for. Whatever the conditions, I doubted I'd ever meet them. I wasn't a hero or an innocent or the greatest person in any sense. More important than any of the facts and patterns, I knew how painful hope could be when you mistook it for something else, so I learned not to hope. I buried my dreams, quietly hated the world that wouldn't let me have even the smallest of them. I lived with the promise that so long as I expected nothing, nothing could disappoint me. I guess I was very wrong. Life has always looked for ways to upend my plans. Oh, Bujie promised the world in return for the bitter piece she stole, but it isn't that easy. Keepers never visibly age another day after they make the promise, but the ways they change beyond that are not predictable. Some can make themselves enormously stronger and tougher than any ordinary person, but they can't stay like that forever, not unless that's where their emergence takes them. You need more power than the promise offers on its own to really, fully rewrite yourself with magic, and that power can only be taken from harbingers. Thinking about those nightmares and the heroes who hunt them, I wonder if the harbinger that nearly killed me is out in the night, stalking someone else or looking for a new home. Right. The harbinger. I pull the curtains closed and crack my door open, peeking out into the hallway. No signs of the thing I'd seen waiting for me outside. Slowly, I creep along the wall and glance past the corner at the door to Mr. Enfield's old room. At least for the moment, it's just a door, and I sigh with relief at the sight of it. Satisfied, or as satisfied as I can be, I find one of the currently empty public rooms with a phone installed. The police can't do anything to a harbinger, but they'll pass it on to someone who can. As I pick up the phone, though, Bujie's last words come back to mind. I'm too dead to think, I don't really know what I want to do, but I haven't decided not to make the promise. If I do, calling for help right now would cause some problems. There'd be someone else chasing the only lead I have, hunting in my backyard where they might run into the new keeper and trace me to the hospital, altogether making my life a lot more complicated. There's also the matter of keepers patrolling certain sections of the city they've claimed or been assigned to, but frankly I just don't want to deal with other people, if I can at all help it. When I think of it like that, it sounds really ungrateful to the chosen children who've probably kept me safe from any number of disasters I never learned about, but it is what it is. I'll call tomorrow morning if I decide to turn Vuji down, but right now I really am too tired for all this. I stalk back to my room, fall into the bed, and do my best to sleep through my whirling thoughts. I wake, as I usually do, to the sun glaring down at me through gauzy sky-blue curtains. Shortly after I moved in here, I asked if they'd replace them with blackout shades. They would not. Something about sunlight being good for you in all sorts of ways, as if that was going to save me. I roll over and gather as much quilt as I can around my head without suffocating myself. I can never actually get back to sleep when this happens, but I try anyway. Eventually, someone knocks on my door, then cracks it open when I don't answer. One of the nurses, here to take my vitals after yesterday's infusion. I drag myself out of my nest, keeping my protests to myself for the moment. Is Dr. Hines around yet? I ask as she pokes a thermometer into my ear. HM. Oh, I think he's out today. Did you need anything? No, I just had a weird question. It can wait, don't worry about it. I don't think the promise on its own would cure me, but I don't know that it definitely wouldn't, and it still might help in some way. Oh well. I haven't decided how to broach it yet. Anyway, is treating keeper-specific issues even something normal doctors do? I have no idea. There's probably never been a keeper with exactly what I have, so even the experts might not know where to start. She's finished before too long. I sit in bed a little longer after she leaves. Why did I even want to know? If the cold comfort of misery is a scab over my wounds, it's just picking at it to entertain an idea like that at all, isn't it? I lay Pearl on the pillow and push myself out of bed, into my morning routine. After I dress, take my small mountain of pills, and brush a forest of tangles out of my hair, I pull my first card of the day from my tarot deck, a simple single-card reading. The Six of Pentacles from my personal deck is still in exile, where it will remain until I no longer hate it. It may be a while. The Sun. The dawn on a dark night. Enlightenment, if you like, or an omen of a recovery to come. For all I used to look down on other kids' childish hopes, I did try to sketch my costume once, a long time ago. I'm no artist, so it didn't end up looking like anything at all, but I tried. I break down again, this time in wild, uncontrollable laughter. Maybe someone outside is hearing and thinking I've lost my mind, but I don't really care. It starts to let up just as it gets painful, but then another thought strikes me: I hate the sun. None of the meanings in the tarot books are things I see in it, and there's no real reason for me to take it as a good omen. Rather than spoil my mood, that only brings forth a renewed burst of cackling. Once the ache in my sides fades, I wipe my eyes on my sleeve, stand, and speak to the window. I didn't dream you, did I, Vuji? If you're still there, I'm ready to talk. I'm happy to confirm that you did not. Just as I hear the words, the messenger appears next to me with no warning or fanfare. How are you faring today, Liadain? You don't really look like a messenger, do you? I ask. I vaguely recognized Vuji's name when she first gave it, so I must have picked it up somewhere, but I don't recall anything specific about her. Stores are full of messenger merchandise, cuddly toys and mascot charms said to be made in their images. N, the most popular of the six, is apparently some kind of fluffy pink cloud animal. Art by keepers or sourced from their descriptions shows him as a round tuft of wispy fur with big dark puppy eyes, 2 front seal flippers but no back limbs, and no visible mouth under his shiny black nose. There are never any little stuffed fish girls on the shelves next to him. Vuji looks down at herself wryly. Would you prefer it if I did? Honestly, something about her does feel more genuine than speaking to the goddess through a stuffed animal. No, I guess not. I didn't think so. Otherwise, you'd have met one of my siblings. We are what our children need us to be. Does everyone you come calling for see a different Vuji? And if they do, what does her say about me? My children need me to be sincere. Right. Anyway, I'm better, I think. More or less. I'm sorry I dash. Don't apologize to me. Ever. She waves an arm dismissively. I came here for you. I exist for you, and for children like you. You needed to say something to me, so you did. I hope it helped you organize your thoughts, but either way, you've nothing to be sorry for. If you say so, sure. I'll remember that. I might have something you'll like better, anyway. I take a heavy, steadying breath. The promise. And that's if I wanted to make it, how does that work? There is a way to these things, but it's quite simple. Once a potential keeper understands the conditions of the promise, all they need to do is accept them of their own free will. There's a sudden warmth to her mental voice. It's subdued, but definitely sounds something like happiness. Those terms are also simple. On Clyasia's behalf, I pledge to foster your growth as a keeper and guide you through your new life with whatever knowledge I can offer. You pledge to embrace and nurture the magic sleeping in your soul. Should you accept it, you are free to do with it what you will. Really? Keepers just take all this power and use it for whatever. Anything you want. A keeper's magic is theirs and it is them. All we do is open the door, and all we ask is that you use what comes surging through. Right then. In that case, tell me about emergence. Ah. Of course. Vuji smiles, very slightly. Keepers stop aging from the moment they make the promise, but they don't stop changing. The religious types say magic shapes a keeper's vessel to best express the inner truths of their soul, and whether or not that's really what happens, it does mark its users. It starts small, maybe your hair recolors itself or your eyes start glowing with power, but can get very strange if you last long enough. Frozen Sun Iona Fianata, the city's eldest keeper and founding hero, has ice sculpture eyes and a bubble of endless winter following her wherever she goes. I don't really care about any of that. What matters happens beneath the surface. A keeper's role in the world is to protect it from harbingers. Nothing obligates them to do that, but most find their own reasons. Seeking emergence is often among them. A fallen harbinger is not completely destroyed, something remains of its heart, and it is not good for such a thing to linger and float freely in the world. A keeper can claim that essence, purify it within themselves and fold its power into their own. Emergence is the soul's maturation, the process through which a keeper grows with their power. Like all magic, its wielder's emotions and wishes give it shape. When it's handled properly, a keeper can direct their own evolution. Rewrite themselves to better suit their needs. So if I want, say, perfect health or complete immortality, eating enough harbingers will give it to me? I can't predict exactly what your path might look like, but if that is your dearest desire, then your magic will create a way for you to sustain yourself forever, she says without hesitation. I glance over her shoulder at the pill bottles covering my nightstand. Whatever I said going into this, it's honestly a little hard not to throw myself right into the deal. Okay. Great. About how many harbingers does this take? Vuji gives a tiny shake of her head. She barely moves as she speaks, not the slightest gesture or twitch or visible breath, so any motion at all stands out. Magic is not so neat and predictable. Harbingers come in all sizes, and the metamorphosis is a path you walk rather than a single boundary you eventually cross. Every step will bring you closer, but there is no reliable way to say how long the road to your goal will be. Apologies. And sometimes a keeper desires something too wide to be accomplished purely through emergence. In those cases, there are special arrangements we can make. This doesn't happen often, but it's important that you know the option exists. Will I need to use it for what I want? I've heard of something like this. I don't know how it works or anything, but miracles that change the whole world are rare enough that the church calendar uses them to mark eras. The current year is Curry 74. No, Budgie says simply. Then I won't worry about it for now. What else? That's all. Those are the conditions in full of the promise between Clyasia and her children. You, Liadain Shiel, are now a party to it. Ah, this isn't part of the terms, but one last thing, her silent speech lowers, darkens. I brace myself for whatever catch is coming. A keeper's first steps are always difficult. They're different for everyone, so I'm afraid there's no way to tell you how to prepare yourself, but I, at least, believe you deserve to know before it happens. If you choose for it to happen, of course. Knowing all you know, do you accept this promise? I grimace. Of course nothing could ever be easy, but it didn't change anything, in the end. Thinking about it, there was probably never any chance I'd turn her down. Maybe that's part of whatever makes a keeper. Yes. Vujji's expression softens into something very warm, almost maternal, or so I imagine. Then welcome to the world, Liadain. It isn't pain that shoots through me as she speaks my name. It isn't a feeling at all, or maybe I just don't have the senses to process it, but I know it's there. I have just enough time to be disoriented before it shatters me, bursts from within like a bird cracking its shell or a star being born, or like there's never been any other me holding it in at all. How can anything live like this? Her many eyes stare out at the world. Some watch through the lenses of her observatory, some borrow the gazes of her tendril servitors, and others still immerse themselves in the first crop of memories harvested by her court. Why would she do this to them? Why would she do this to herself? What delusions has she drowned herself in? And with every bizarre new sight she sees, every inexplicable change for the worse, a fresh wave of bottomless horror screams silently through her being. This place is a stage for stilted shadows. They cannot see, they cannot love, they barely live. They are pale, pathetic echoes. Mockeries. But it is not their fault, what they are. What they were made. What was inflicted upon them. And if we do not love them, who will? She cannot love them, nothing that would make them this way could love them, and who else remains who ever so much as knew what love is? They are kin, however damaged and debased, and they deserve a kinder fate than they were born to. They deserve better than she can offer. Everything does, but only she is there for them. In the depths of her sanctuary, of herself, she takes a sort of form, weaving a strand of her essence into the shape she wore before. If, that is, that form had never been a body, but a solid shadow, limned in amethyst starlight and hewn from darkness so deep it twists the eye around it, dragging the sparse color and light that exists here into its depths. A her-shaped absence in the cosmos, yawning and hungry not to subsume and grow, but to embrace all who suffer under the same curse as she. Her body is a purely symbolic affectation, of course, but one she cannot help but cling to, if only in remembrance. So as her part in the work to come begins, she resolves to love them all, as best she can. And if she too has forgotten how to love, if her feelings for these creatures only ever grow into an ugly, pitiful thing, the love of an orphan child for a broken-winged baby bird fallen from its nest, then so it goes. It would hardly be the greatest of her failures, and yet her every fault arranged in a row from first to last would still be as motes of dust before the incalculable weight of sins borne by the architect of this world. For most of my time living on the 7th floor, the looks I get from patients I don't know have been familiar ones. When their gazes aren't vaguely pitying, they sort of pass over me, like even the people here don't want to think about something like this happening to a girl my age. Since my latest emergence, those looks have changed. People seem to make a point of not looking at me for too long at all. I can't tell how much of it is staring at someone who looks weird, hastily averting your eyes when they notice you doing something rude, and how much is trying not to draw attention from someone you're afraid of. Are they really afraid? Maybe that's still being too hard on myself. I did search the sea for any reports about mysterious bursts of sickness or the weird new keeper who beat up a Fianata, but if they exist I can't find them, so that's not it. Noirin still treats me like a person, and so do the nurses who see me often. I'm sure they already know and they're waiting for me to say something. At this point, am I fooling anyone or only making things harder by staying quiet? The smart thing would be to get ahead of it, explain myself to people here and ask them to respect my privacy, but I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to be the hospice's mascot keeper, and I especially don't want the news to reach Dad. That's most of the reason I gave Shona and Maid a fake name to most of the world. It doesn't matter whether the new mystery keeper is Liadain or Ina, but him hearing of one with my name would raise questions I don't want to answer. Assuming he'd even bother to ask them. My tarot corner has mostly just become my corner. Even when I'm only passing through, I never see other patients sitting there. That's fine too. I'm spending most of my time in my room, anyway. Partially to stay out of sight until I've decided what to tell people, yes, but I also don't want to show anyone what I've been doing. Maybe someday I'll share it with the world, but at least for now, my Harbinger journal is only for me. My book collection includes a few tarot journals and notebooks. I've never used them for much. My handwriting used to be quite good, but it fell off when I started having days where my limbs were too weak to do much or my hands were too numb to hold anything steady. By the time I left school entirely, it had atrophied to barely legible scrawling. Typing is just easier now. But the night after I killed Olunla, once I called the sanctuary to report its human partner missing, I picked out an unmarked green book I hadn't used for anything else and started making a record of all my Harbinger experiences so far. I began by going through all the monsters I've encountered, writing out what they looked like, what they did to the world around them and the people they touched, what they wanted, everything I knew or thought I could safely intuit about them. Some of their sections are much easier to fill out than others. My notes on the fourth forest Harbinger, the one whose name I never learned, read simply, swarm. Worms, mold, impossible colors, eggs. Spreading itself. Reproducing. Is that a thing? Not enough to put any clear picture of it together, and I'm not going back there anytime soon. I only included it for completion's sake. On the other end, I know as much as anyone ever will about the two I've absorbed Yerfon, who wanted to bless humankind with the moral benefits of slow, miserable death, and Olunla, who looked out at reality and decided it was too boring and colorless and meaningless to be allowed to stand. I have at least some good guesses as to where they got their ideas, especially Yerfon, but still don't know exactly why those things were so important to them. Do Harbingers pop into being needing to ruin people in a certain extremely specific way like humans need to breathe, or is it some more abstract need they choose how to fulfill, more like people looking for ways to keep from dying of boredom or despair? Do they ever change their minds? Those questions and many more like them go into the back half of the journal, where I list things I know about Harbingers in general and things I want to somehow find out. Especially if they might help make my hunting strategies safer. Hence all the questions about exactly what Harbingers take from people and how that relates to what I get out of killing them. As for what I know, the things I'm not quite certain of but confident enough in to treat as information. That section is short, but not quite empty. Harbingers can definitely take their shapes from human thoughts and feelings. The old idea that they're born from our pain is true in at least some sense, for at least some of them. There are probably other kinds I don't understand yet too, though. Irakia could have come from a person I didn't manage to trace it to, but nothing felt human about Aryan or certainly that worm mold thing. Plus it wouldn't make sense for the wilderness to be teeming with Harbingers if they all spawn from people unless they flee the cities and change themselves to better suit life somewhere else. No, that feels like a stretch. To grow from whatever they begin as, to take their true shapes, they need to feed on people. Or other Harbingers, if I take the forest as an example, but as far as I can tell the ones here all grow up by hurting humans. Even Olunla had liked one girl more as a witch than a victim, and whatever they were doing together was more important than anything else to it, but judging by the fifth step in its copied books it still needed to break somebody. Since I started this journal to figure out strategies that'll work for me and minimize danger to everyone else, that's a big unsolved problem, and all the ways I can think of to investigate what exactly they take from people and how much of it they need are horrible. Besides, even if things just barely worked out with Alunla, it wasn't exactly less dangerous than the already grown harbingers I've faced. There have to be ways to make my magic work on them that don't involve weeks of letting them run loose. No, there are ways. I've done it before. I just need to find the ones that don't require me to nearly kill myself. Really, when it comes to figuring out a good longer-term hunting plan, I don't have much to work with at all. I've encountered 7 real harbingers and I'm fairly sure I understand 2 of them. Still, this has to be better in the long term than answering every question with, "They're scary mystery monsters we can't understand." Believe in yourself and do your best and it'll all work out okay. Maybe that approach is fine for the Silver King and the Stardust Seraph, but me, well, my best is awful for everyone around me. The sooner I get to a point where I don't need to act like this to stay alive, the better. For everyone. As for what I need to keep living, the power I take from Harbinger's Vuji said that emergence took its form from what a keeper felt and wanted. She said we could direct our own evolution. Clearly, the details of how that works are a little messy, which by now I should expect of anything to do with magic. All the things I've taken from them so far are useful, yes, but of them, I can only count Yerflun's power from pain as progress toward my goal. Even then, it's certainly not the kind of progress I'd have chosen. It feels like what comes of emergence has almost as much to do with the harbingers as me. Maybe even like they get a say in it, judging by the 2 I've fully absorbed. Yerflun ripped its own heart out and offered it to me with the last of its strength, begging me to carry on its awful legacy, which I suppose I'm doing, in a way, by drawing magic from my own suffering. I can even sort of understand where it came from, how someone in pain they can't do anything to escape might cope by imagining their situation as something important in some grand romantic way. That just doesn't mean there really is any true beauty or insight in dying of an illness, right? I wonder how Yerflun would feel about what I've made of it. Not that it matters. It's gone, and whatever part of it lives on through me has no voice. There's just my voice judging the scars it left behind. Then there's Alunla's inheritance. It's strange at first to even think of as a power. Do I have the power to speak Clarish? I've already had enough exposure to this magic language to know it's a lot more complicated than that, though. Alunla wanted to make itself a world where there was no line between reality and imagination, where everyone's lives were as full of wild, beautiful, terrifying magic as mine is quickly becoming. It thought I never could have killed it if I truly understood it, so in its own words, it cursed me with more understanding than I ever could have found before. Thinking of it from a distance, if I didn't need to eat harbingers to live, would I have killed it? Probably. What Alunla and its witch wanted for themselves didn't seem so bad. They were still going to destroy who knows how many people to get it, though. It might have been worth it to them, but not to me. Or those people. Anyway. In both cases, the Harbinger's influence is impossible to miss, but they do expand on concepts that were already part of my magic rather than staple on something completely new. Alunla's curse does nothing at all to bring me closer to fixing myself, but it is a natural progression from my keen Harbinger senses. I'm not sure what that means for the whole process. Taking what Vuji's told me with my experiences so far, my current best guess is that what I want sets a path for the way my magic will eventually grow, but the individual steps to get there and some of the details about the final destination may vary with the specific harbingers I absorb. Either way, I don't know how much that information does for me. I'm not going to turn up my nose at any harbinger I can find and kill, and it's not like I can make friends with a harbinger, blight it, and ask it very nicely to please make me immortal when I eat its soul. That's ridiculous. Oh well. All of this is important stuff to know, even if I don't know how to take advantage of it a month into my new life. Wait a second. Back to the forest. If harbingers are born the same way there, how do any of them survive long enough to grow up? A normal human can't do anything to a harbinger, no matter how small, but if they're born with only older, scarier monsters to prey on, then what? Are they born in groups like those spiders that have hundreds of children and most of them eat each other? No, that's a stupid guess, and I don't even know if it's right to think of them as sharing a life cycle or being born at all. Alunla lived a lot longer than Yrfln, but Yrfln had still been bigger and scarier by default. Ugh, the forest brings up a lot of messy questions I have no way to answer. I'm not going back there anytime soon, so let's just focus on regular harbingers for now. I spend that night and most of the next day filling in my journal, making sure that everything I've put down as knowledge feels right. And maybe more importantly, that my long list of questions, things I don't understand and really need to, is complete as it can be before I find another harbinger. I can't predict what I'll be able to learn from any given monster, and work smarter, not harder, is extra good advice when the price of messing up your work is death or worse. I can take a little time to make sure I'm doing things right. But not too much time. My health does feel fairly stable for the moment, and I can push through its typical lows with stolen strength once I have a chance to refill. But my next severe turn for the worse could still come any day, and figuring out how harbingers work, to say nothing of what they are, feels like it could easily be the project of even an immortal lifetime. No, I'm sure it has been the ongoing project of several keepers' lives. If I sit and work on my journal for whatever time I have left, only leaving to hunt when I'm sure all my existing information is perfect, I'll die sooner or later, probably sooner, and leave behind a book filled with incomplete scraps of what the people with real experience already know. I'm not stupid enough to think that a special talent for this facet of magic automatically makes me better than keepers who've been hunting harbingers for years or decades. Or centuries, in one case, but there's no world where I go ask Sophia the Deathless for help. I don't want my soul dissected. When I put it like that, though, it sounds like a good argument for getting help from those experts. If only they wouldn't ask me questions back. Ugh. Well, I'll see how things go with whatever directions Vuji offered to point me in when she turns back up. Until then, the only way I know how to do things hasn't exactly worked well, but it's brought me closer to my goal than doing nothing. So after one day's mostly rest, I continue my nightly outings, searching for whichever monster will become my next step toward immortality. And for some life to hold me up in the meantime. I burned nearly all of my supply in Alunla's wound, keeping myself alive and standing while I simultaneously pushed myself to the brink of death. I've changed my approach a little since the last time I stocked up. I don't want there to be a pattern of mysterious outbreaks of illness for someone to trace back to me, after all. People are much harder than harbingers to detect at a distance, but while I'm wandering the streets at night, focused almost entirely on what my magical senses have to say, it's only a little more effort to search through the wisps of human life surrounding me. When I sense a lone person who feels particularly healthy, and I can transform without drawing too much attention, I just take a sip of their strength as quickly as I can, then go on my way. So even though I don't find a harbinger over the next few days, those nights are still productive. Not in the way I want them to be, not with work I want to be doing, but I need to prepare for the next insane, impossible thing a harbinger does. To everyone who's unknowingly helping keep me alive, sorry. And thank you, I guess, for all the good that does you. On my patrol one night, maybe 15 minutes walk from the hospital, my phone chimes in my pocket. That's strange, since I have no friends except Pearl and maybe Vuji and don't give anyone my contact info. I step off the sidewalk and onto someone's lawn, look around to make sure no one's close enough to listen or peeking from inside the house, then finally pull it out and... Dad is calling. Really? It's been around 2 months since he left me on the 7th floor. I was starting to think he might just wait for me to die. I squeeze my phone in one shivering hand while I decide whether to answer it. After the last days I've had, I don't much feel like talking to anyone, least of all him. But if I ignore him, he might call the hospital to check on me and make it a whole thing, so best to get it over with. Dad? Hi. Hey, well yeah. How are things going over there? Settling in okay? Dad greets. His voice is full of a kind of fake cheer that's become very, very familiar. I mean, about as well as I could expect. That covers it, right? It's just that my range of expectations has changed a lot since we last talked. I'm not sure how to read the long pause before he next speaks. Was he expecting something else? It's not like I'd have said much different if I hadn't made the promise. Not to him. Great. That's good to hear. Another pause. Listen, I'm sorry I haven't been able to make it over there for a while. Things just keep coming up at work, time gets away from me, you know how it goes. There's another long pause. I open my mouth to trade him my own stale, gutless reply, but the words don't come out. Something else bitter and aching rises up from my chest and catches in my throat instead. My jaw clenches as the weight of everything I really want to say to my dad crashes down on me, made even heavier by the thought that there wouldn't be any point if I did. There were times when my dad was there for me, in the past. There were times when he should have been there for me and wasn't, and those times became more and more frequent until that was just how things were. Here and now, knowing that whatever I say, everything I've experienced the last 2 months could be met with the chasm of strained words between us getting wider than ever rather than anything I actually wanted to hear him say, that's what would hurt more than anything, if I didn't already feel numb to it. I guess it doesn't matter in the end, after all. No. I don't, I say flatly. It's not everything I want to say to him, but it's honest, and that's something. I never would have said that a month ago. All the years of going into surgeries with uncertain outcomes and seeing him the next day or next week, being left completely alone in recovery, that one time I was scheduled to go home and he showed up hours late with no notice, they taught me that there's no point in opening up about my problems to him. No point in asking him to take my life more seriously, or doing anything but playing along and hoping our conversations end soon. Why did I even say it now? Stupid. As far as he's concerned, nothing's different, and I have no plans to loop him in. But it's okay. I've had a lot going on too. Big life adjustments, I add. I'm sure. But hey, it really is a nice place they've got you set up in, isn't it? Seems like a dream for a kid your age. No schedule, no one telling you what to do, no. Seriously. But before I can decide what to say to this, or if I should just end the call, Dad trails off. Eventually, he breaks the silence with a dry, uneasy chuckle. Sorry. I just realized you're probably yeah. Could you forget I said any of that, he asks. Okay. I don't think I can. But at least he caught it this time. Thanks. Appreciate it. And during the tense silence that follows, I smell something. No, it's not an actual scent, that's just the way it feels to my soul sense, the part of me that's been reaching out in search of nightmares to hunt and life to steal even as I struggle through this conversation. Anyway, listen, I'm pretty occupied right now. I should probably go, I say. Sure, of course. What are you up to, he asks. I'll tell you later, I lie. Oh. Okay. Well, good to hear you're finding ways to keep busy. I'll really do my best to clear some time soon and come see how you're doing, okay? Aha. Just let me know ahead of time if you do. I have things to do too. Will do. Until then, really glad to hear you're doing okay, Leah. Take care. My phone chirps as he ends the call. He'll do no such thing. I'll probably never see him again. But that's fine. If Dad wanted to be in my life, he should have decided I mattered to him before I became someone who mattered. I sigh, put my phone away, and turn my full focus back to the distant but horribly distinct stench trail I can already tell belongs to a full-grown harbinger. Every harbinger feels awful in its own unique way, but stench is exactly the right word for this thing's presence. My first impression of it was like a waft of stale air I smelled with my soul. Not stale in a dry, dusty abandoned attic way, though. It's closest to the sour, faintly rotten odor of a lived-in house that isn't clean nearly enough. Grain, my closest friend in primary school, before my sickness scared everyone away from me, had a mom with a hoarding problem. When I first sensed this harbinger, felt a new source of corruption lurking in the distance, it reminded me of the way certain parts of her house smelled on my rare visits. That was 10 minutes ago. Now that I'm standing outside the small house it's emanating from, it smells like all those scents are trapped in a place completely closed off from the rest of the world, with no possible way to air them out. All the human odors and all the piled up trash blend together, surrounding the place in a thick, swampy haze of stink. Not for the first time, I kind of wish my soul's senses weren't quite so painfully keen. Keen enough to feel the single person inside, too. That talk with my dad already pushed me to the limit of human interaction I can handle in one day, and this is likely to be a lot worse. Of course, with my luck there's no way the harbinger would just be nesting in an empty house. The person inside could make this complicated, and I am sick of complicated. I can't tell exactly what state they're in through the stinking aura, but it's a bad sign that they're still here at all. It means they either can't run away or, like Yerflun's victims, the thing eating them alive has made them happy about it. The house itself looks fairly normal, save that the lawn plants around the front walkway are a little overgrown. The lights inside seem to be off, so I can't spy through the windows at a distance. I call for my magic, past the point of caring if any other night walkers are watching me too closely. Emerald shadows slither out along the twilit street, then rise as strands of solid darkness, weaving themselves into the ornate black dress and heavy hooded capelet of my keeper regalia. Once my transformation's play of dark light and solid shadow fades, I summon a single card. The whole world twists and lurches and whirls as I call on Irakia's power and transfer my vision into the card, then float it forward to peek through the front windows. I want to find out where the victim is and just how bad a state they're in before I plan my next step. But there's nothing inside. No, that isn't quite right. It's not dark like looking into an unlit window at night, it's blocked by something. A black curtain, swaying as if in a breeze. As it shifts and folds, its movements expose dozens of tiny tears in the fabric. None are big enough to see anything through, but faint light does leak through the shreds. Which actually further obscures whatever's inside. Whenever a hole appears that might be just big enough to peek through, my card only catches a brief flash of light that's quickly sucked back into the folds of the fabric. I circle the house, checking every window. They all look the same. A house isn't an airtight fortress, though. There's got to be some little crack wide enough to sneak through for roaches and spiders and all the other pests that like to make an ecosystem out of where I used to live. That should work. Unless those weird curtains are some kind of barrier the harbinger is using to wall its nest off from reality. In that case, I may just have to rot the front door down and charge in. If I'm locked out I might have to do it anyway, but, one step at a time. My card can't quite wriggle through the place where the lower sliding window meets the upper half. I try the front door, but there's no mail slot, and the frame it fits into doesn't leave enough space to fit into either. What about the air vents? No, I don't really know how those are set up, they must be blocked or filtered somehow. It's not like the air conditioning drags bugs in all the time, and those are smaller and more flexible than a tarot card-sized intruder. The chimney? That might work. I float up to the roof, slip through a grate in the square vent atop the little brick tower, and steer my card down the dark, narrow tunnel, around a flap that opens into an ashy fireplace, and out into the house. No magic pushes my card out or drags it into a horror realm, as far as I can tell. It's just as dark in here as it was in the chimney, with no lights on and no starlight streaming through the covered windows, but my card does have a kind of night vision. Its vision seems to function exactly like a single human eye's. I'm not sure what I was expecting to find inside, but at a quick glance, the house doesn't look like a hoarding horror story. It's messy, yes, but not in a way that matches the unnatural stench. There are old dishes piled up on the table in the kitchen just ahead, some balls of dust, and... Wait, what even are those damp clumps scattered all around the tile floor? I float my card down to inspect them. They look like hair. Hair, though I can only tell because they remind me of those shed strands that get stuck in my drain sometimes, especially when my hair used to be longer. They're like someone pulled a great wet heap of blonde hair out from the drain, did their best to untangle the mass, then tangled smaller clusters of it back into new long, thin shapes. Like naughty, dirty little severed braids, or narrow lengths of human hair rope. A few are tied into ornate shapes, like those ceremonial ribbon knots they use in weddings to symbolize tying your lives together. They're all still wet enough to be dripping onto the floor, and flecked with chunks of dross and rubbish. Outside, my body shudders at the thought of whatever those organic-looking bits of grime are. There's more of them the farther into the house I go. Other than those threads of hair and the swaying curtains covering the windows which, viewed from in here, look like they're on the outside, there are no clear signs of a wound opening or the harbinger's physical presence. I find the victim first. A thin, pale man sits curled up alone on a couch, breathing sharply. The bangs of his matted dark hair have just started to grow over his eyes, and there's a hungry sunkenness to his cheeks under his short, unkempt beard. The floor around the couch is practically covered in wet, stringy hair knots, simultaneously filthier and more elaborate in their designs than the rest. He glances up, startled by the sudden motion of my card floating by, and his hollow eyes widen at the sight of it. Almost immediately, a shrill shriek rings through the house. A human-like figure drops through the ceiling, jerks to a stop in midair a few inches from the ground, then snatches my card up and tears it to pieces. Snapping back in my body, I stumble and scream as dull, hot pain lashes through my head, like a friction burn on my left eye. Leaning into my cane doesn't quite save me from crashing to the sidewalk, and it crashes to the ground as I break my fall with one hand. Hot blood trickles down my face. What was that? A problem with Iraqia's power or just something this harbinger can do? Doesn't matter. I still have my eye, it's just not working so well right now. My vision blurs more even as I wipe the blood onto my sleeve. I absorb a tiny wisp of life, rub the last bit of blood away, and start toward the house. I don't understand what's happening here yet, but I don't think the victim will get between me and the harbinger, and that'll have to be enough. The stink of corruption grows stronger with every step up the front walkway. I cover my face with one arm, which doesn't help at all, and try the front entrance. It's locked and the doorbell makes no sound, so I start banging my cane on the door. Thankfully, this new one feels a good bit sturdier than the one I lost in Alunla's wound. I told you, I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here, just like you wanted. So please stop pushing or testing or whatever you're doing and just shut up already, the man's hoarse voice roars. I'm a keeper. A harbinger's eating you and I'm here to help. If you can open the door, let me in. Otherwise, say so, and I'll get in myself. I call back. But how do I know this isn't another trick? The man asks after a long silence. The stench in the air becomes a clinging, invisible smog, thickening and swirling around me until I feel like I could choke on it. A screeching torrent of harbinger speech blasts through my mind. No, get out, go away, we can't leave. You can't go. We haven't finished reuniting / rotting yet. There's no sense or structure to its words. Its voice feels less like Alunla's strange poetry and more like the wave of nonsense thoughts Iraqia dumped into my head. Even so, I understand it much more clearly this time, aside from one confusing phrase where two words or ideas that don't fit together are overlaid, mashed together in a way I can't make sense of. I ignore it for now, calling to the victim again. Did you hear that? Is it doing anything to you? It's mad, right? Because it doesn't want me here. If it's not in your head, if you can open the door, let me in and I'll get rid of it. If it's not open in a minute, I'll break it down. I summon my cards into being and pluck one charged with my sickness from my orbit, preparing to reduce the front door to decaying splinters. It's strange to think of infecting a door, but after the forest in Alunla's world, I'm fairly sure I can do that if I have to. I don't. Not yet, at least. Just before my deadline, faint footsteps come into earshot behind the door. No, no, please, no, you can't, the harbinger whimpers. The knob rattles. I ready my cards for whatever comes next and train my senses on the man's soul. He's wreathed in the harbinger's smell, but not corrupted in the twisting, complex way I've seen before. It feels like this harbinger is simply draining something from him, taking and putting none of itself back to fill the empty space. Please don't go. Are you mad at me? What did I do? I'll fix it, I promise. The door slowly creaks open. The man peers out, eyes narrowed in suspicion, until his gaze settles on me. You're really, he whispers, then chokes on his words, starting to silently cry. Help. Please help. Whatever I did, I'll fix it, I swear, but don't go, you can't go, you don't know what could happen out there. Painfully slowly, like he's afraid he might be stepping into a vat of acid, the man takes a single step out onto the porch. And a thin limb shoots out from behind him, latching onto his wrist. He freezes and croaks in horror, not so much as looking over his shoulder as a filthy, fetid creature of nightmare emerges from the darkness. It's small, with its arms and twiggy legs suggesting the rough shape of a skeletally thin woman, but shrouded in a cloak of grimy blonde hair that falls over most of its body, and the arm latching onto its victim is braided with itself, as if it was split into coils of soft clay and wound tightly back together, leaving a twisted mess of shapeless, ropey tendrils for a hand. Its head is obscured by a shifting circle of angry black scribbles, like the living, moving equivalent of a face scratched out of a photo, and as far as I can see in the slivers that aren't quite blacked out, the only thing behind that circle is a gaping white hole in reality. I tap just enough life to give myself a normal person's strength. In a panicked flurry of action, I force my weight into shoving the man to the side, knocking him to the ground. Then I launch 3 cards charged with my sickness into the house, slam the door shut on the harbinger's squirming arm, and detonate all my cards at once. Curls of frozen emerald fog spill through the crack in the door, and I push them back inside with my will, urging them to spread through the house. To fumigate it. I press my back into the door as the creature yawps in protest. It bashes against the door, first pounding fists and then crashing into it with its whole body. It babbles and wails all the while, and while the strength of its impacts wane, its voice rises, distorting and mixing with itself until I can't tell if the unearthly sound coming from inside is supposed to be screaming or sobbing or laughing. But finally, it fades. I'm certain I didn't kill the harbinger just like that, but it has withdrawn. Pulled away from me. I'll have to keep up the chase, but I can spare a moment to get its victim away from it. Hey. It's gone for now. Are you? No, he's obviously not okay. What a stupid question. Am I my dad now? What do you even say to someone in this situation? No words have ever made my pain better, and lots of well-meaning people have tried. What happened? I ask instead. You don't have to talk if it hurts, but anything you can tell me about it might help. And we should really get you out of here either way. He's still in shock, from the looks of it. But when I offer him my hand, he does take it, drag himself to his feet, and stagger away from the house with my help. It's a bizarre feeling, but not a bad one. It's not like I don't want to protect people if I can. I've just always had to worry about saving myself first. As for the harbinger, nothing comes tearing out of the house to chase us. For a moment it feels like it's retreated entirely, leaving only its lingering stench in the air. Until its presence brushes past me, and it whispers into my ear with a waft of hot, putrid breath. I see now. I still have so much work to do before I deserve your loyalty, your love. One day, you will understand. You will wake up, feel my absence like a missing limb, a missing sense, and reach out for me. No matter how cold and withered your hand is by then, I will take it, because it is yours, because nothing else will ever fill the hollow you left at my side, and we will tether ourselves to one another and never ever let go. Until that blessed day comes, your heart will wander sometimes. Wander where you wish, it croons. No, something in its voice makes me think of it as a her. Just know that no matter how far you go, how the distance between us grows, how time without you slows and slows into a frozen desert of empty moments, I will never leave you. I can never leave you. No matter how gone you are. If you cannot be happy, I cannot be happy. Seriana. And with those words, she vanishes from my senses. Seriana blinks out of being without a trace or a trail. The stink of her presence lingers, and a stale, sour echo of her odor clings to me even as I step back from the house, but there's no heart of the corruption. No hole in the world she could have burrowed into. As far as I can tell, she's just gone. I scan the area with my soul, searching as thoroughly as I can without going back inside. This might be some ploy to take her victim back the moment I leave him alone. Which maybe that's a way to catch her again, but no. He already feels like he'll die without urgent help. Letting the Harbinger anywhere near him would be murder. And it's not even a good plan. I need to figure out how she works, not just hope she can't do the same disappearing trick again, and right now my best chance at that is to ask him. Help first, though. I really don't want him to die. I weigh the risk of using my phone to call for the sanctuary against the danger of leaving the man alone, plus the idea of searching for a phone in that dank, disgusting house. Honestly, though, if people are going to find out who I am, there's plenty of easier clues for them to follow than a still probably confidential emergency message. I fish out my phone, still searching with my soul for any sign of Seriana coming back for us, and call 112. Hello. I'm a keeper with a Harbinger victim who needs to go to the sanctuary as fast as possible. We're in, the south end of the boundary. 71 Birch Row, I say, going off the house's mailbox. It's a single victim. Are you or anyone else injured, and what's the status of the Harbinger? A woman's calm voice asks after only a slight delay. Alive, but running away. I think. How long will it take them to get here? I won't leave him alone, but I do want to catch her. What's your lighthouse ID? The responders can update you there once they're en route. My what? The Keeper Network. Oh. Right. One of those reasons I want to avoid that whole church registration thing. I don't have one. I'm new. I see. Well, in that location, it shouldn't be much more than 10 minutes. That's okay. I'll wait. It's not like I'm giving up the chase. Seriana's already escaped. And from the way she was talking before she left, she's taken some interest in me. She wants something from me. Whatever that means will be very bad for me if it goes her way, yes, but I haven't lost her. If I don't find her, she'll find me. Somehow, I'm certain of that. All right. Please stay on the line until the ambulance arrives, and keep me informed if anything changes. Sure. I put my phone back in my pocket and go to check on the victim. He sits on the sidewalk, staring back at the house. The Harbinger's gone. People are on the way to help you. You're going to be okay, I say. For all the time I've lived through one, I don't know any ways to comfort people in situations this horrible except make sure they don't die. I've done all I can on that front. Now I can only hope I'm not lying. Silence. The man glances up at me, says nothing, then shifts to stare wide-eyed over one shoulder. You don't need to push yourself, but if you've got the strength to talk, can you tell me what happened? Once you're safe, I'm going after that thing, and anything you know might help, I say. I stop myself from using her name, though I'm not quite sure why. I guess there's no need for him to understand her. It's my job to think about what she's doing and why and how to use that against her, not his. If he recovers, it'd be best if he forgets as much of this as he can. What would I even ask him, in this state? Can you think of any horrific personal crises that might have spawned your nightmare stalker? It didn't, I don't know why it happened. I don't know where it came from. His voice is husky and rasping, like he's had nothing to drink in much too long. I heard a voice. No, I didn't hear it, it didn't use words, but it asked if I was alone. I didn't answer, but it said no, you aren't, you never will be again. And then there it was, he rasps. There it's been. Did I do something wrong? I must have had an answer in my head. Should I have thought something different at it? How? How do I do that? His voice isn't too parched for me to hear the desperation in it. The pleading. You didn't do anything. I don't think it would have mattered. It's a harbinger. It was just doing what it does, I say. And thanks. Don't say anything else if it hurts. Oh, thank you, he says. Thank you, he repeats a minute later. I leave the victim alone after that, watching at a distance for any signs of Sariana. None come. A few minutes later, a wailing ambulance pulls onto the street and opens up. The two medics inside climb out, but rather than rush to the man's aid, they step back into the sides, making way for a third person. For the keeper accompanying them. A girl who must be near the top of the promise age range steps out from the ambulance, and white wings with long, thin swan feathers unfurl from her back. The long, wavy fall of mint green hair framing her face and her keeper regalia a teal and white dress that would look almost like a priestly robe with a single wide detached sleeve, if it weren't for the low-cut, strapless bodice contrast her deep bronze skin, and her eyes aren't eyes at all. They look like they're made of water, not frozen but perfectly still, with a gradient of progressively darker teal blues shaped to create the impression of whites, irises complete with lines and flecks of color, and shadow on the sea pupils. She raises her right arm, which is covered to the shoulder in white bandages. No, there is no arm beneath the places they don't quite cover. The thin lengths of cloth are just acting as if wrapped around an invisible limb. Then they unfurl as one, becoming three thin streamer appendages that spread out and sway slowly at her side. She's beautiful. So beautiful it's almost unreal. Like she stepped right out of some classical painting to take a quiet stroll through our world, never losing even a scrap of grace across the journey. I don't recognize her from anywhere. If I did, I'm certain I'd remember her. Is the area still clear? She asks. She speaks Clarish with a light accent I can't place, not that I can really place many accents. Her soul is hard to read. It's not at all like Nyava's, defaced beyond legibility. It's just muted, in a way that feels strange for a soul to be. The presence of every keeper and harbinger I've met has had an unmissable intensity to it. Magic wants to express itself. It wants to tell everyone with the right senses to listen to whatever it has to say. There's none of that with this girl's aura. It feels like she's not exactly obscuring it, but somehow keeping it from shouting its full message to the world. All I feel from her is a title, Tarnished Angel. HM. Yes, I think so, I say. The keeper takes her own look around the house as if to double-check, then approaches the man and kneels. I step back, leaving her to her work. She places her remaining hand on his shoulder and murmurs something to him, to which he simply looks up, stares at her for a moment, and nods. She speaks again, louder this time, in a low, soft voice, and while I don't recognize the language, there's a steady poetic rhythm to her words. Her cloth appendages begin to gleam with cool cerulean light. One of her bandages draws close to him, wrapping around his back comfortingly, while the other two fold their tips into sharp triangular points. Then, moving in unison, the pointed bandages slide smoothly through his skin and into his heart. If the process is at all painful, he doesn't show it. He actually seems to relax at their impossible touch, if only a little. In a little under a minute, it's over. The keeper's bandages withdraw, pulling themselves free without the slightest blemish to show for their intrusion. She nods to the medics, who unload a low-wheeled stretcher from the ambulance and move to help the victim into it. Do you think he'll be all right? I ask. A small, sad smile plays across the girl's face. We've done what we can. He'll live, yes, but his recovery is a question for the experts. I clench one fist, digging my fingers into my gloved palm. I guess I should have expected that. The way Seriana treated him, the holes she left in him now that she's gone, whether he'll survive isn't as much of a question as how much of him is left to save. She takes a few steps in my direction, leaving a polite distance. You're hurt, too. May I heal you? Oh. Am I? The Harbinger left without much of a fight. I obviously know what she's talking about. I know I'm hurt. Whatever Seriana did to my card left a very visible injury. Your eye is bleeding, she says mildly. Right, yes, I murmur. It's really not that I don't want a healing keeper with some kind of diagnosis power seeing what's wrong with me, or figuring out what I usually do to heal myself. Well, it's not only that. If I'm not allowed to cure myself with magic, it's even less likely that someone else's magic will do it. And the last thing I need right now is for someone trying to help me to catch even an echo of my sickness. I'll be fine, I say. Just go get him the help he needs. They could take him back on their own from here. It wouldn't cost me anything but a little time to help you, she says gently. It's a slippery harbinger. I'll feel better if someone's with him. The girl tilts her head, watches me expressionlessly for a few quiet seconds, then nods once. Well, I'll respect your wishes, she sighs. Dispatch said the harbinger was still at large. Will you be going after it? Emicham. I'll get out of your way, then. Good hunting. She bows slightly, joins the medics in the back of the ambulance, and shuts the doors behind her. Once they leave, I get enough distance from the house to escape Seriana's stink, summon a single card, and use it to inspect my injured eye. It's not, in fact, just a cut. Blood is still trickling down my face, yes, but there's also an ugly bruise that looks like it's on my eye. I use enough life to stem the flow and reduce the bruise to a mild discoloration, leaving that eye bloodshot with an odd purplish tinge. It still looks weirder than a normal black eye, but, well, my vision seems to be fine. I wipe away as much dried blood as I can, end my transformation, and search the surrounding blocks for any traces of Seriana I might have missed. There are none. Still, to my surprise, I find I don't feel terrible about tonight. I can't quite call this a good outing, when I lost a harbinger and sent the man I saved off to an uncertain fate, but he is in a much better place than he was before I found him. At least this once, I've managed to do something good without making anything worse for myself. It feels kind of nice, strange as it is to think I'm capable of that after the last few weeks. It's not like I don't want to protect people if I can. I've just always had to worry about saving my own life first. I am still worried about it, of course. Like that girl said, though, I've done what I can for now. I'll see about finding Seriana before she finds me tomorrow. Liadain. Do you have a moment? As soon as I step out of the elevator, the night nurse at the 7th floor's front desk calls to me. Oh, huh. It's the same older nurse who tried to stop me from leaving to meet Shona, back on my first day as a keeper. Now she just waves me over. I still need to check her tag to remember her name. Banva. Sure. What is it? The nurse mumhs to herself and glances down at something on her desk as I approach. So, Dr. Hines called in just a little while ago with a message for you. He's gotten in touch with Wright. There was a specialist in your condition he was asking after. He found one who's available to meet with you tomorrow morning. It's a little short notice, but is that all right? Will that cause any problems for you? No. Please tell him that's fine. Oh, good. Good. I'll do that, she says, smiling thinly. It looks like she's trying to be friendly, but still can't quite make sense of what possible problems might come of my weird new schedule. All right, thanks. If that was all, I should do bed stuff. Yes, that's everything. Good night, Liadain. Night. Sorry for the trouble, Banva. I'm glad I didn't have to fight you to leave the hospice back then. Something's tight hold pins my limbs to a cold surface. Something's rough grip wraps around my neck. It has so many hands. Are they hands? No, they can't be. Skin doesn't feel like that. Hands don't move like that. Hands that are not hands push their way into my stomach and wrap themselves around my organs, then squeeze all at once, their coarse embrace strangling the life from me inside and out. This is wrong. It's all wrong. This pain is not mine. This horrible pressure is the wrong type of hurt. Something other than my blood is eating me alive. What is it? Why? Why can't I move? Why can't I do anything? Let me go, I don't want to die, stop. Through the last gasp of breath I can manage, I know, I don't open my eyes. They're already open. I just notice what I'm looking at for the first time. Pearl's smiling pink face, still nestled comfortably on her side of the pillow. There's nothing else here. Nothing but a heavy phantom pain lingering in my neck. I'm fine. I'm fine, I insist in my head over and over. I must have been dreaming. It was only the kind of shapeless nightmare that leaves nothing behind but fear and pain and the sense that even if you've already forgotten all but the tiniest random scraps of it, the play of random nonsense that was just chased away by the harsh light glaring through your too thin curtains must have been something truly horrible to make you feel this way. I still can't move, though. I just can't find the strength. Several more minutes pass like that, the pain in my chest, slowly fading, until I summon up just enough energy to cocoon myself in blankets and snuggle close to Pearl. One of her fuzzy gills flops over, tickling my nose. I'm not sure how long I spend laying there, but eventually, it all passes. When did I last have that sort of dream? It's been a while, a few months, at least. The raw terror of knowing I was going to die and there was nothing anyone could do about it obviously never went away. Sometimes, though, in the stretches of time between anything changing for the worse, it did sort of scab over. So why now? Life as a keeper certainly hasn't been wonderful, but I have a real, serious chance now, and a life where I have to fight screaming horror creatures sometimes is infinitely better than no life at all. I don't understand, and I can't exactly make more sense of it without even knowing what I was dreaming about. Maybe I should try and keep one of those dream journals my occult books talk about, write out every scrap of memory I can cling to before they fade, but well, I'll see if it keeps happening. Wait. On a hunch, just in case Sariana is stalking me in my sleep or something, I turn my focus inward and check myself for harbinger corruption. And gag at the fetid stink of my own soul. That's a bit of her smell followed me home last night, wouldn't quite wash out with the flow of my power, but this is too much. She's tried something. Was she here? In my room, looming over my bed. I feel around my room, then the rest of the 7th floor, but can't find any trace of her outside myself. Did she do something to me from afar? I yelp and shudder at a sudden soft knock on my door. There's a perfectly human soul behind it, though, and when it opens a moment later, it's just a morning nurse here to get my vitals. Oh, Dr. Hines asked me to remind you. You've got an appointment scheduled in 40 minutes now, she says while she takes my temperature. Ugh. Right. Of course this happens when I already have plans for today that could be really, really important, involving someone who has a lot of other stuff to do. Sariana's just going to have to wait a couple hours. There you are. You must be Liadain. Lovely to meet you, I'm sure, a woman's low, dry voice says. She smiles, though it doesn't reach her eyes at all. When I arrive in the exam room, there's a pale, sharp-featured older woman already seated next to Dr. Hines. Her red hair is kept back in a tight ponytail, save for a few loose wavy strands around her face, and her clothes are distinctly undoctorly: a navy-tailored suit, rimless glasses, and none of the tools I'd expect a doctor to carry except a small notepad in one of her suit's flap pockets. Yes. Sorry I'm a little late. I accounted for that when I scheduled this. I know how keepers can be about bedtime. I'm very careful about bedtime. I just had a morning, I grumble. She shrugs, smirks with her eyes, and says nothing more. Right, then, Dr. Hines cuts in with a nervous smile. Liadain, this is Dr. Cantillon. She doesn't practice regularly anymore, but she's a trailblazer on the academic side of understanding keepers' medical issues. She's about as well equipped as anyone can be to figure out a treatment plan that'll give you the best possible odds. Ava's fine, if you prefer. I've no preference with patients, Dr. Cantillon says. I've already made that decision in my head. Nothing about her feels like a first-name person. I've read your files. Familial autoimmune condition, early presentation, 2 rejected bone marrow transplants, prognosis poor, she says, after a brief delay suggesting that was not the first word to come to mind. I sit down and cross my arms. You can say, hopeless. I know what my situation looks like. Excellent. Well. No, it's really not, but you know what I mean, she says, waving her own nitpick off. That makes this easier. We've only discussed you in terms of your case and I had no idea how delicate I was expected to be. As I was saying, I'm all caught up on your medical history. What I need from you is an overview of your current health status, with a focus on anything you've done to change it with magic or emergence. She pulls out her notepad, removes a pen fastened to its cover, and clicks a little button on top of it. Oh, and leave us alone for now, if you would, she says, addressing Dr. Hines without facing him. He narrows his eyes. Pardon? What? Why? He's my doctor, you can't just kick him out. I am not kicking him out, Dr. Cantillon says with a sudden firmness. Her posture seems stiff as she draws in a slow, steadying breath through her nose as though mulling something over, then breathes it out all at once. Listen, this is not some issue of confidential secrets of magic I'm bound to keep from the unworthy. I'm only trying to help. You can stay if you must, but you really shouldn't. All right. Why not? Dr. Hines asks. Because I'll do my best to explain without going too far, she replies, looking the other doctor dead in the eye in a way that seems to stare past him. There are certain things that once you've noticed, once you've really started to understand, you can never stop seeing. Nothing you've said to me suggests you've even started to notice those things. That's good. Unless you're looking to respecialize into my field, which I do not recommend, you should do your best to keep it that way. Some of what we're likely to discuss would make it very difficult for a man in your position, a good doctor trying to do right by his patients, only one of whom is a keeper, to continue functioning in that role. I am speaking from first-hand experience. Dr. Hines says nothing, although the longer Dr. Cantillon goes on, the stiller his gaze and the tighter his jaw becomes. He cups his chin, glances back and forth between us, and suppresses an uneasy grimace. Liadain, do you need me here? He eventually asks. I'll be fine, I say. You're sure? Yes. If you don't want to subject yourself to, whatever that means, don't do it for my sake. Okay. I'll be right outside. He stands, smiles faintly at me, and slips through the door. Honestly, this might be better for me anyway. If I want this to help at all, there's no way around talking about how I've been keeping myself relatively healthy, and that feels easier with this woman than it would with Dr. Hines, someone who apparently likes me and wants to help and maybe wouldn't anymore if he knew what I was doing to people. Which isn't to say that it feels easy. My thoughts run through all the things I'm hiding from the world, and all the things I've done to keep them hidden. It's hard to imagine any normal person wanting to help me after I explain what I've been doing to them. But if I'm ever going to move beyond stumbling blind through my new life, I'll need more information on how to deal with all this from someone. Is this all confidential? I ask. Maybe it won't be once I've actually explained myself, since my mass life draining clearly passes that danger to self or others threshold, but I still want to hear it from her. Dr. Cantillon makes a face like I just spat in her drink, but quickly smooths it away and nods. I am still a doctor. I signed on to all the agreements here this morning. The usual exceptions do technically apply, yes, but I'm really not in the business of shoving myself into keepers' personal matters. And I don't report to anyone, if that's what you're asking. I'm doing this for my own edification and to assist you children in whatever ways I can, not in service to anyone else's goals for you. Well, it sounds like that's the best I'm going to get. So I tell her. I ball my fists, do my very best to bury my feelings, and tell Dr. Cantillon all about the part of my power that lets me steal others' health. How I discovered it, how I've been able to use it, who I've used it on, without naming specific names. Everything that might be important. And I think that's it, I finally say. I used a little bit to fix my eye last night, but it's been a while since I burned health just to treat my normal symptoms. Things have been stable enough, at least for now. Alright, then, Dr. Cantillon sighs. She glances up from her notepad for the first time since I started talking, looking me over with a sort of resigned exhaustion in her eyes. I'll admit I have some questions about exactly how you've handled this, but as I said, I'm not here to criticize your behavior. I only want to understand what's happening to you and how we can best address it. So let's start there. You've explained it in rather functional terms, but did your power come with an understanding of what exactly you're doing when you use it? I blink twice. Is that really it? Please answer the question. We can talk about what I think of all this once we've established the facts, if you really want to know. Okay. Well, I think I've pretty much said everything I know about it. It's just something I can do. And here's the problem. Magic doesn't work like anything else. The same is true for any otherwise normal thing it touches. It's magic, yes, I say. I know how obvious that sounds. You wield it. You live with it. You understand the processes of it in ways I never can. But when the promise plunges children your age into an entirely new world, you often don't recognize exactly how different what you're doing is from the rest of reality. I did live most of my life in reality, you know. I still do. Dr. Cantillon waves a hand dismissively. Yes, but have you thought about what it even means to drain health from a person? Health is not a single discrete thing. By a certain simplistic but workable definition, it's only an absence, a lack of illness or infirmity impairing your normal functioning. It certainly isn't a tank you can fill up and expend. No, I admit. I've been too busy trying to survive to navel-gaze much. I suppose that makes as much sense as anything else. But are you starting to see now? I sent your doctor away because this is no longer a matter of health and medicine. I sometimes wonder how much any doctor's work is. What does it mean for the entirety of medical practice if there's any truth to the story that the incredibly disparate set of issues we call sickness all crawled out of a harbinger's corpse? And by the way, the timeline does work out for that to be the truth. I know at least enough about the story she's referencing to recognize it. She means the Ephesian scourges, the first plagues, deadly epidemics that ravaged the world all at the same time. According to church history, an enormous living cataclysm of a harbinger created them, and before that there was no such thing as disease. But I guess I don't see how it matters if I'm sick because of something a dead harbinger did centuries ago or simple terrible luck. I just want it to stop. Dr. Cantillon stops herself, frowning a little deeper than what I've started to recognize as her default expression. But I'm digressing. Probably. What I mean by all this is that if your condition is as entwined with your power as you've suggested, it's likely no longer accurate to think of it and treat it purely as a disease. It may be better described as a curse. Or perhaps more accurately, Dr. Cantillon pinches the bridge of her nose, pushing her glasses up onto her forehead, and groans. This may well be a mangled metaphor, a desperate hand grasping for understanding it can never truly catch, but do bear with me for a moment. I promise I hate this at least as much as you will. She shakes her head, fixes her glasses, and stares right at me. As a story. A story about dying of an illness. The solar embrace bears down on Missing Lake like a rain shower of light, heavy curtains of white radiance spilling over the breadth of the clearing. The shoreline is vacant, only clefts in the disturbed soil and small, quickly dispersing piles of dust visible as signs a struggle had taken place. Hidden beneath that, however, is a wealth of clues imperceptible to a human's natural senses alone. Amidst the heavenly glare, a lone figure emerges from the tree-line. Somehow, the uncanny brilliance of the scenery befits him, as though the world is a mural he's been painted into as its centerpiece. He strolls casually down the incline towards the shore, his long hair flowing behind him like threads of gold glimmering in the light. Scanning over the basin, he drinks everything in with an eager smile. Two harbingers. One whose lingering presence is sticky and foul like the leavings of a slug's trail. The other is distant, yearning, unfinished, but catches in the eye like a speck you just can't rub out. It's easy to place where each had ripped into the world to open up passage to their wounds, but both are long gone by now. Just as interesting are the echoes of Screaming Him and Big Sis. Out in the clearing where the grasses are trampled and deep gashes have been rent and gouged into the earth, Shona's presence is somewhat clear, but only somewhat, and nothing looks like it's been charred or set on fire. All evidence points to Maid, then not that she was all that noticeable on her own. But why was the sullen night without the full impact of her chipper ward blaring in her wake? Probably had something to do with two harbingers showing up at once and in the middle of an embrace at that. It didn't ring as an unthinkable scenario by any means, but something unusual certainly must have happened. And the other presence obviously couldn't have been Big Sis, so that left someone using a weapon she'd blessed. It was easy to narrow down a suspect given who was most likely to be working with Shona and Maid, though. Sure enough, with enough pointed concentration, he could detect the slightest trace of Truth's lantern. Were they okay? Nobody had flared in distress, but then, it's not like anyone would have sensed it if they had already been drawn into one of the wounds. A quick check of Lighthouse confirms Aisling hasn't posted an incident report yet. He'll send her and Shona a message in a bit to make sure they're all right, but his gut feeling is that they are, if only because of the embrace. Before that, there's one last curiosity catching Roland's attention. A familiar aura is mingled with the rest. Not particularly fierce, but not as subtle as Aisling's either. A pretty, chilly, weepy little presence, like a cute little sister who keeps scraping her knee. It's sprinkled around in small, concentrated points across the basin, and fading in the scorching rays of the sun nearly as quickly as the ashen remains of whatever one of the harbingers had tossed into the world. Roland lets the tug of the nearest of those motes guide him to it. He looks down to find a black feather caught in the grass, singed at the edges by the sun's oppressive light. Extending a hand, he tacks a point of phantom mass to his palm and anchors it to the feather, causing the small black plume to flit off the ground and into his grasp. Holding it up to his face, his grin widens. He can use this. Ha, he chuckles to the empty clearing. Shona and Maid were holding out on him. Now who should he ask about what happened here first? Aisling would give more concise info, but Shona is more likely to blab well, it doesn't matter too much. Not long now. He and Ill Wind would be meeting very soon. Roland pockets the black feather and places his hand above his brow like a salute as he turns his ruby-red eyes directly to the sun. Its blinding glare burnt others away like dry kindling, but he sees it differently. A great burning eye with 1,000,000 lobes looking down on them all, its pupil, a long tear into utter blackness like a cat's or a snake's, carved down its center and through every concentric layer. Tendrils of white and scarlet lightning crackle across its breadth, the sheer vastness of which the Stardust Seraph doesn't so much as consider. "What do you think, big guy?" Roland welcomes the sun's opinion. It doesn't deign to reply. Maybe did the pupil contract, just a sliver of an inch? Nah, he's kidding himself. Idly, he wonders if he's the only one who sees things this way. Perhaps not. He's only ever seen one other person stare straight into the sun as brazenly as he could and come out completely unscathed, but he has seen it happen. With Irida, of course. As we ride toward the city proper in the back of an ambulance, Shona chatters noisily about nothing with wide eyes. Mai does her best to play along. Aisling furiously types notes into a page on her phone. And I, surrounded by the closest thing I've found to friends since I checked into the 7th floor, think about loneliness. I haven't always been alone. I haven't always wanted to be alone. It took me longer than most people to find my first friend, given all the time I spent in and out of hospitals, but I did find her. Well, no, Grain did most of the work of finding me, but still. We met at my reading spot among the wild cherry trees behind our school, on a day when I was spending much more time flicking pale white blossoms out of my hair than reading, and she decided we should be friends once I explained that no, I wasn't out there because I particularly liked the trees. They make those big horrible messes every summer, so I hate them. Cherries don't even taste that good, she'd said. So we did. We read some of the same books, she and her other friends taught me to play champions, and I showed her what little I knew of tarot at the time. And at that age, while we were sharing something like the same life, that was enough. Maybe there were never the seeds of some lifelong bond there, but it was still my first time connecting with someone beyond my family or the rare kid near my age in the hospital. And now she's gone. It's not like she ever told me, sorry, Liadain, you're just too depressing to be around. But her visits got rarer, and our conversation started being about less and less as she moved on into a stage of life I'd never make it to. Eventually, she just stopped checking in, and I never bothered to reach out and ask her why. I already knew, and making her say it would only hurt us both. Eventually, everybody leaves me. They always have, they always will. Is that still true, in this new life full of new people, or do I just want it to be? It's easier to push everyone away before they can do the same to me, or before I accidentally eat them or they find out that I'm even worse than they thought I was or some other awful thing I can't even think of yet happens. But I can't say anymore if it's the best thing I can do. Things are different now. I'm a different person now. People aren't going to treat a keeper the same way as a nobody with a few months to live. And yes, if Dad or Grain or anyone else who'd already decided I'm not worth the trouble changes their mind now, I'll probably ignore them, but this is different. I'm not going to get stuck up on some stupid question like whether these girls only want anything to do with me because I can break reality with my mind when I wouldn't know who any of them were if they couldn't. So why does letting them come so close still feel so much like letting someone point a knife at my heart? Ina? Ina, hey, you listening? You alive? Ianea. MMH? I mumble. Yeah, I was just asking if you needed anything before they dropped you off at the Ho at home. That is where you're staying for now, right? Yes. And, I can heal myself, I'll be fine there, so I don't know. Not really. Unless you have a sweater big enough to hide all this under. I pinch a thin strand of smoke-white hair between my fingers and tug, not quite pulling it out. But why? It's so cool. Everyone's gonna love, Shona trails off, seeming to recognize that she's saying something dumb. Right. Everyone is maybe an important word there for you, huh? Yeah, well, anyway I don't have one on me, but we could probably figure that out. Wanna go shopping? I point out the back windows. Despite their dark tint, shafts of painfully bright light leak into the car. How? Same way we got those glasses on the way here, duh. There's people sheltering in stores. If 4 keepers come by while they're there, that's nothing to worry about. It'll probably make their day, if anything. Maid squints out the window. We still don't want to be wandering around in that light. I nod in emphasis. Only a little shopping, then. First, closest place we can find. And I mean, which do you want less, Ina, a little more sun or to show everyone your awesome metal blood thing? Ugh. She has a point. The emergency responders ferrying us around might have other things to do, too, Aisling notes, not looking up from her phone or slowing her pace at all. Shona scowls, looking around the cabin until she spots the big red push to talk button on the intercom in the back, and reaches past Maid to push it. Hey guys, big thanks again for the lift. So listen, is there any way we could make a real quick stop? One of us needs to pick something up on the way home. Probably. Where? The driver's voice crackles back. 1 second on that. Thanks. Shona folds her arms and grins, smug and self-satisfied as I've ever seen anyone. See? Super easy. No trouble at all. Just let Ina have this, Kay. Right, Ina? Alright. Fine. We can do that, I say. I think I might still prefer to just go home and run to my room, but I don't know. Shona clearly needs something she can label a win in her mind. One other thing though. How are you with things that need to be kept kind of quiet? I love secrets. Shona tries to whisper, but her new voice doesn't seem to have that option. It comes out like a stage whisper on a show played through speakers turned up too high. Terrible. Whatever you're thinking, don't tell her, Maid says at the same time. Traitor. Shona gives her a playful shove, but pointedly doesn't argue with the warning. It's really not that big a deal, just Ina's not my name. It's not even a name I prefer. I'm Liadain. It's nothing I wanted to hide from you like I told Aisling earlier, I just didn't want my dad to hear about a keeper with my name and get ideas. So. Sorry. Maid shrugs. Why are you apologizing for that? It's your business, I think. Only thing it changes is that everyone will know in a few weeks, now. No they won't. Shona protests. I flinch at her volume. Aisling glares over her phone, but quickly shakes it off and gets back to work. Yeah, sorry about that, still getting used to ya, Shona mutters. But I'm really seriously not gonna spill something like that if it's important to you, you know? Thanks. Don't worry about it so much. I wouldn't have said anything if this was some huge problem that could ruin my life. I want Dad to leave me alone, that's all. All at once, a few things start making sense to me. What Shona saw that I couldn't back in Sariana's wound. What the Harbinger was talking about, in that voice and those words that didn't sound at all like her usual ramblings. Why Shona reacted the way she did, and why she seems so desperate now for any other note to end the day on. Probably, I say. Clyassia should just come up and lay people eggs on the shore every few years. Shona grins and nods, as if she's just solved some hard problem with that plan. That does sound more convenient, I lie. Aisling glances up, one eyebrow twitching. I'm sure she's already come up with 10 gaping holes in this idea. But I'm equally sure she's a lot better at reading rooms than I am, so it's no surprise when she bites her lip and gets back to her work. So Shona searches up a place where some of the stores are still open, reads the address into the intercom, and a few minutes later, we disembark in the middle of an embrace to go look for oversized sweaters in a mostly abandoned mall. This is what my life has become. Aisling stays in the ambulance, still working on whatever she's writing. I'm not at all used to buying clothes in person. I'm not sure if I can remember the last time I did, actually. I know the brands I like on the sea and the sizes they come in, and that's been enough for a long time. I don't really know how to just browse, and nothing I see here feels as me as my usual clothes. Not that it should matter at all. I'm just here for something to throw over my bizarre veins while I walk through the 7th floor common room, and there are 2 first responders outside wasting their time while I durdle through the aisles. Hey, how about this one? A few minutes into the second place we visit, Shona offers me an oversized black hoodie. It reads, printed in bold white text, Tummy Ache Survivor. Between the words, a little crying cartoon stomach clutches its stomach. It's midsection. Really? I ask. Yeah, you really didn't think this one through, Maid says. Shona, undeterred, holds it up to her shoulders and does a lazy little wiggle dance. Come on, you know that's funny. If you hate it so much, why are you smiling? Huh? Because my body is a traitor and I can't wait until it's all replaced with inky nightmare ichor. I can't wait. Shona blinks. Maid stares at me with a confounded expression. Even the clerk watching us looks like he has some serious questions for me, but thinks better of asking them. Finally, Shona laughs. She squeezes her sides and clutches the sweater to her stomach and laughs and laughs and laughs, never seeming to run out of breaths, her electronic echo blasting her cackles through the whole store and out into the concourse. I don't know what she's laughing at. I didn't think I was joking. I'm still not sure how I'm so okay with all this, but I am. I really don't care what becomes of the body I'm stuck in, as long as I'm immortal at the end of it. See, that right there, that was a great bit, right? Sometimes you just gotta stare down the horrible shit in your life and laugh. Shona drapes the sweater over her arm and, in emphasis, shoots me with a single-finger gun. Maid buries her face in her hands and lets out a muffled wail. What am I doing here, she asks. You know what? Fine. We've already spent way too long here, so that one's fine, I sigh. Give it to me and let's go. Perfect. Amazing. The best. Shona pumps a fist and starts toward the register. Here, let me get it. My treat. I hope every time you wear it, you think of what an awesome time we had today and forget the part where I blew you up. I don't think I can do that. But thanks, I guess. The ambulance drops me off first. It still feels strange, having other people come so near to this part of my world, but that secret's already out anyway. Get in touch when you can. I'll keep you updated on the situation, and I might have important stuff for you before then. Aisling waves goodbye with one hand while she types with the other. And we'll see you when we see you, I guess. Sorry this didn't go better, Maid says with a half-hearted smile. Shona rubs the back of her head sheepishly. Yeah. Sorry again about that whole thing on my end. Punch that grimy little shit in the face for me, if she's still following you around. But do it later, Aisling insists. Tomorrow at the earliest. If there's an emergency, well, contact me if you can, use your own judgment if not. You've survived enough mistakes to start learning from them, I should hope. Right, I mumble. I should rest, then. Bye, everyone. Maid, hey, before we get moving again, can I stay at your place for a while? Shona asks. That's the last thing I hear before Aisling pulls the cabin doors shut. I raise my hood, pull the strings tight and start into the hospital, hurrying through the lobby and into the elevator. Staff at the desks should just see me hurrying out of the embrace. But right as the elevator lurches into motion, I look down at myself and wince. So what now? I'm not going to just show off everything that's happened to me. I guess I can't hide anymore, really, but not now. Not yet. I tug the sweater off, flip it inside out, and tuck stray strands of hair into my hood until the 7th floor bell chimes. It's getting late by the time I make it home, not that you could tell from looking out through the glass elevator at the painful glare over the flower fields. I fix the laces on my hood, drawing them tight as they can go, and peek out at the 7th floor. I was expecting the place to be deserted, with everyone hiding in their closets the way I always used to spend embraces, but there is a small crowd gathered in the common room, where they've covered the windows with heavy white shutters that only allow the smallest possible slivers of radiance in through the sides. Even those thin shafts of light twist and shift strangely along the edges of the room, like an octopus searching for a way out of its tank. Nevertheless, the patients huddled in the central space look like they're doing their best to treat this as any other day, only most are wearing sunglasses indoors. A few of the more familiar faces look my way and wave. Liadain. There you are. Banva calls from the front desk. I look at her through the corner of my eye, afraid to give her too close a look at my weird face. "Are you alright? I know you've, been out a lot lately." She purses her lips, no doubt running through all those questions the nurses haven't brought themselves to ask me. "Well, I'm just glad you made it back safe," she finishes. "I'm fine, yes. I cut myself off as yet another question occurs to me, if I was sheltering through the embrace somewhere else, hence why I took so long to make it back. What am I doing back here before nightfall? Ugh, I should have just stayed with the other keepers until night came. It didn't cross my mind because I've just had too much on it to leave any room. Whatever. Who am I fooling anymore? She knows why I've been out a lot. Everyone who pays any attention to me probably knows. Me too, is all I say. And, I think your sweater's on inside out, she adds after a moment. I look sheepishly down at my clothing, then glance over my shoulder to examine my reflection in the window right across from the nurse's station. Thanks. I'll fix it in a minute, I mumble. At least I had that much foresight. And, I look back over the small crowd. I can't hide this much longer, not to anyone. Well, maybe to Dad if he never shows up here again, so it really shouldn't matter who I talk to first, but it just does. And I don't see the person I'm looking for anywhere. Do you know where Noirin is? I ask. Banva says nothing. When I look back at her, she's pursed her lips and clenched one hand around the other. What is it? I press. The words come out of my dry mouth as a strained croak. Stupid, pointless, I'm sure I already know what, but how bad is it? Noirin's. Banva blinks and her grip tightens a little more as she sees my face head on. She takes a breath, visibly steadying herself, but that's all. She wasn't doing so well this morning. She's in treatment now. I could check when they're expected to finish, if you want, but well, she may just need her rest. Of course. Now of all times, of course she is. Was she already suffering when I ran off this morning? Would I already know this if I paid attention to anything but myself? Would it matter? Liadain. Are you listen, if it's important, I could take a message, or just pass along that you're looking to talk when she's available. No. No, that's fine, just it's nothing urgent. I'll leave her alone. She'd probably be happy to know you were thinking of her, Banva says softly. At her age, you're happy to hear from your kids about most anything. All the more at a time like this. She has a kid, though. I'm not him. Banva smiles to herself. I suppose not. Even so. I'll pass the word along, unless you'd really rather I didn't. Fine. If you think it'll help. I guess I'll try and rest myself, for now. That's a good idea. Take care, Banva calls after me as I hurry through the main room. I do no such thing. Back in my room, I grab my Harbinger journal, make a little tent with my bed covers and headboard, and sit there in my inside-out sweater with Pearl hugged under one arm, staring at the mostly blank pages meant for Isabel's new Harbinger. Mostly, I think about Noirin. I don't think I could have done anything to help her with my magic, but I'm not certain. I ripped the disease which laid at Yerfun's heart out at the root, and I still have it stored in one of my cards, but that's not at all like trying to heal a human sickness without ripping out their soul. It does at least raise a question to my vague impression that my magic just doesn't work to heal other people. More importantly, I've never even tried to be there for Noirin, or any of the others who don't deserve to live any less just because I don't know them. I've only barely considered it. I could make up some nice-sounding reason why I didn't, maybe even one that I believed when I first dismissed the idea. Dr. Cantillon did say treating diseases with magic was especially hard. Really, though, I think it was just fear. Not even my desperate rush to save my own life, but fear of not of getting someone's hopes up and disappointing them, although I'm sure I would. I'm just terrified of knowing beyond a doubt that my power is that I am a selfish, greedy monster whose magic will only ever be good for keeping me clinging to the edge of life, a few more stolen days at a time. But it came from me. From a miserable wreck of a girl. You behind, you know. We can go together. To the place where the faces of everyone who's passed through here will never fade from your worthlessly feeble memory. Even seeing them from afar, Sariana's swirling scribble eyes no longer look as empty as they did during our last encounter. Or maybe it's just easier to see the shifting of those scratchy animated circles outside the gloom of her wound. Tears stream down Banva's face as she gazes behind the Harbinger's new mask, trapped there in gibbering, petrified horror as her thoughts are swallowed by its leer. No, you're not, can't you're, NHGHT, CKGH, Banva chokes out rough, wet denials as her throat is slowly crushed. As if those smothered cries were music, Sariana begins to chant in tune. No more guilt, no more guilt, no more guilt, and no more GUI. The sinuous limb holding Banva up is severed in an instant. The card I sent spinning through the air slices clean through it at the midpoint before whirling back around for me to catch it. Sariana reels back and shrieks in agonized delight as her form crumbles away into thin air, leaving behind only her noose hand clutching Banva's throat as she collapses to the floor. I rush into the nurse's station and fall to my knees at Banva's side, using the edge of my conjured card to quickly but carefully cut through the rope of grimy hair wrapped around her neck. The illness the card dyed itself with when it made contact with Sariana makes quick work of the lingering strands, and when I throw the weave away, it doesn't even manage to touch the ground before it's already decayed into nothing. Banva is bigger than me, but I burn some of my stored health without even thinking about it to be able to turn her over. Physically, the only damage I can see is the red and purple bruising around her neck, but her eyes are wide open and bloodshot, and her whole body is rigid with mute horror. Banva, Banva. Can you hear me? Are you okay? Please, please say something. I plead while cradling her head. There's no response, except for the trembling breaths passing between her lips. Sariana must have been attacking her mind as well, when she was looking into her eyes. My cheeks burn. A few tears trickle down my face and onto the nurse's. The nurse who learned to play shogi from a lonely patient just so he'd have someone to talk to and share it with, who'd bring me meals to order when I woke up in the middle of the night and vomited my stomach out, who's only ever worried for me and done her best to help me. A single frayed finger, already rotting and burning away at the ends in tiny embers of cold green fire, reaches from behind me and wipes the stream of my tears gently away. Then, as I look back, Sariana lifts up her new mask to put that damp coil of rope into her scrawled mouth, as if to clean her fingers after a meal, and bites down, gnawing furiously on her own form. How miserable it is to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait while you tether yourself to anyone but me, she wails through the sounds of tearing sinew and, inexplicably, crunching bones. I can't do it anymore. I can't be dragged along and along on these strings of suffering while you won't so much as look my way. I can't. I duck beneath the semicircular desk of the nurse's station, but not to hide. I need to make sure Banva gets help before I get out of here and take Sariana with me. At least, she should follow me, but if she doesn't, I'll stay. I'll make sure she can't hurt anyone. I frantically scan the counter's underside. In every hospital, there's always a chance that an angry or unstable patient, a distraught family member, or an intruder might cause an incident, and that's to say nothing of harbingers. For emergencies like those, it's common for nurses' stations to have panic buttons hidden under the desk, and I've been in and out of hospitals more than long enough to know about them. My eyes finally land on a plastic module with a toggle switch on the side and a pair of circular buttons, one red and the other purple. There's two buttons to distinguish between incidents involving people and disasters involving harbingers. If I had to guess what the switch did, it toggles the alarm between a silent and a loud, but I can't be sure. I'm not even sure which of the buttons on this one applies to humans or harbingers, so I just press down both. A little red light on the module begins to blink wildly in response, and that's good enough for me. I'm sure Sariana can feel my terror at the idea of her staying put and choosing my home as her battleground. I'm sure she'd do that if she could. I'm just betting what's left of my life on the idea that she can't, that she's as tethered to me as she says. Everything I know about how she works tells me that she works through me. They'll be safe when I'm gone. I won't be back until she's dead, and after that I'll deal with what comes after that when I get there. And sure enough, when the elevator door slides open and my reflection in the dark glass comes into view, Sariana still stands behind me, the same looming, distorted mass as before. It hurts to share your blood, you know. It really, really hurts, she whines. It sounds like something beautiful, doesn't it? Opening ourselves up, letting one another's essence mingle in our veins, a part of you living in me, always. I fish my phone out of my pocket, doing my best to ignore her, and search for Truth's lantern. Ashlink's Reef is the first result. I blur through its pages until I find her details, buried halfway down the staff page, and call her. But no. It can't be, since there is no life in you. No love. There's only pain and spite and misery and never anything else. I jump as a fraying fist slams on the glass beside my head, nearly fumbling my phone. Hello. Yes, it's me. I know what you said about using magic, but I have to, I babble. Sariana. She followed me home and stormed into a hospice full of normal people. She's hurt someone I know, and I'm going to kill her. Was there ever anything else? I don't know why I ever cared. I don't know why I still care. What am I still doing here, dearest? You, Aisling winces. Now I know how that sounds through a phone, all right. Please slow down and tell me what you need from me. Sorry. Given the thing you were warning us about, exactly what is not safe about me using magic right now? If I need to, which I do, what do I need to know to do it the safest way possible? Call for backup and let someone else handle this one, Aisling says without hesitation. Which I assume you don't consider an option. But here I am. Here I always will be. No matter how much you hate me, I can't give up on you. Sariana's rotting fingers reach out and slink along my hand. I bat her away, tightening my grip on my phone. That depends. Will using magic kill me? Or drag me into some fate worse than death? No, but bear with me a moment. I know you're in a hurry, but the risks involved in spontaneous emergence are metaphysically complex. Of course they are, Aisling admits as a tinge of frustration creeps into her tone. You won't die, but if something goes wrong, you might lose control over aspects of yourself, is the simplest way to put it. Of your power, your faculties, your actions. Of what you're becoming. Think of it as emergence that isn't part of the normal growth process, isn't especially likely to empower you, and may not align with what you'd actually want for yourself. I know you weren't too distraught about what happened earlier, so for some necessary context as to how bad this can get, I believe Naya Fianata did what she did during one of these episodes. Oh. I wasn't convinced until that last part. Okay, that does sound serious. I'm going to avoid that at all costs, but there's still a harbinger in my home who I'm really sure I can kill. What triggers spontaneous emergence? What makes it worse? Tell me how to do what I need to do, not what I should do instead. Yeah, that's about what I figured you'd say, Aisling mutters. How urgent is the situation there? You clearly aren't fighting her while we have this conversation. Are you? No. Just trying to lead her away from home. It looks like she's still attached to me. Good. In that case, as I understand it, you're most at risk for spontaneous emergence when you're reaching with your magic. Trying to do something you've never done before, or on a scale that's new to you. Magic isn't a muscle, you can't wear it out or strain it just doing what you normally do. The danger comes when your soul is shifting to accommodate something new. How confident are you that you can handle this one with your usual toolkit? As confident as I can be of anything about harbingers. Sariana gained something, some sort of power beyond what she usually had since she put on the other harbinger's mask, but I've already seen it in action. I know how it works, and it's not a problem for me. Fine. Then just do your best to do that. And give me a minute. I might have something more specific for you. She abruptly ends the call, leaving me alone with Sariana as the elevator opens on the ground floor. I run for the closest back exit. Coarse fingers squirm along my shoulder and squeeze. A spectral anchor trailing behind me, but not one heavy enough to actually hold me back. I glance around the garden-lined walkways behind the hospital, transforming as soon as I confirm there's no one else around. Something's changed this time, though. As wisps of light and shadow wrap around me, two entwine themselves into a long, thin shape floating at my side. Instinctively, I reach out for it, and it solidifies into a walking cane, carved from some ink-black wood, but constructed with a perfectly practical derby handle and flat rubber tip. Not a weapon, no more than the rest of my regalia. It's just a new tool my magic's offered me, perhaps responding to my acceptance that I do need it, at least for now, and I'm not hiding my health or my power from anyone perceptive. I'll take it. I lead Sariana as far from the hospital as I can, pushing along through the sickening tugs and pressures of her presence, until my phone chimes. Liadain? Holding up all right? Aisling asks. I guess. She's still following me, I say. Stop it, stop it, why does everyone want to steal you of all people? You're only beautiful when you break, and you've already done all your breaking with me. They can't even look at you and remember what it was like when you were a real person, so why won't all those seeping bags of trash just leave USB already? Sariana screeches, ripping out thick clumps of her hair as long as I am tall. Which was the goal, right? Good. Aisling's a little quieter when she speaks again, probably holding her phone at a distance. Sariana keeps on wailing and thrashing. Since I'm holding a cane, I don't have a hand free to plug my uncovered ear, so instead I press it to my shoulder while my phone covers the other. It does almost nothing to keep out the kind of noise a harbinger makes. I'll keep this quick as I can. There's a local keeper who checks recent crimes and deaths for signs of harbinger involvement, wildly out-of-character actions, lingering impressions at the scene of the event or on any survivors, etc., and flags them as suspicious or all too human. You described Sariana as somehow elusive, manifesting without really being there. If you're still having trouble getting to her core, finding where she came from and going there might help bait her out or pin her down. Locations like that are important to cluster as sometimes. Makes sense. So what? Did you find her there? As Aisling speaks, Sariana picks herself up and continues trailing off me. She doesn't seem to have the strength or speed to tear my phone away, only to wrap her decaying hands around my limbs and tug, forcing me to shake her away over and over. Look at me. Look at me. Please look at me, she babbles all the while. Possibly. I have 3 cases that look like potential matches for your stalker, Aisling says through the noise. A double suicide in the Weald, souls either taken or transmigrated before anyone could test for corruption. A man who committed suicide in his home, after which his wife vanished without a trace. A domestic murder-suicide where the killer left a note about saving her from the things under the floor. Routine check found traces of harbinger influence around the death sites for those last 2. Nothing conclusive, could have even been unrelated entities passing through, but they're the best matches I've got. I'm sending you the forest landmark and the 2 addresses. Okay. Thank you. I can use this. It's not like I had a destination beyond, far away from home, in mind. Honestly, if any one of these is where I need to go, and she found it in the last few minutes based on what little she's seen and my vague description of what Sariana was like, that's ridiculously impressive. Be careful. Check in when you're done, or if you need anything else, Aisling says, and ends the call. Alright, I murmur to myself. I flick Sariana's fingers away as she tries to pull my hood down. Let's take the worst walk ever. It takes all my willpower, bolstered by my memory of shoots of rope growing from Shona's bleeding eyes, not to kill Sariana 10 times over the next hour. My only breaks from her constant putrid whirlwind of affection and animosity come when we pass other night walkers. They're a little rarer than usual today, but Sariana giggles and cheers every time I yell at someone to get out of the way. Then, inevitably, she'll try to hug me, or squeeze my hand, swing our arms happily, and attempt to lead us off in some other random direction, and the cycle begins again when she interprets my refusal to follow along as proof that I hate her and want to abandon her. Of Ashling's destinations, the murder house is closest, so that's where we head first. It's locked and deserted, save for the for sale sign in the front lawn. I can feel faint traces of the presence that was here. It smells like opening a book and finding maggots nesting between the pages. It's nothing like Sariana, and she pays it no mind, so I head for the next house. If I have to take her to the Weald, I don't know what I can do except walk all night or call Shona for a ride. I don't know which idea is worse. But I don't. Sariana goes strangely quiet as we approach our second destination, or what remains of it. At the address Aisling sent me to, there's just an overgrown lawn in front of the wreckage of a freshly demolished house. The construction equipment still parked beside it hasn't yet had time to clear away the ruins, it seems. If there was anything to come back to here, it's gone now. But the remains do still feel distantly like Sariana. The Harbinger herself shifts around what once would have been the front facade, looking what's left of her birthplace over. "Well. Have you been listening after all, dear?" she asks after a long pause. Her mask's blank smile spreads into a grin. "This doesn't matter, not really. All that matters is that you listen to me. Look at me. I keep telling you, if you would look my way for just a moment, you'd understand that I am here to help you. I'm the only one who ever has been. Okay. Here I am. What is it?" I turn on the Harbinger, glaring into the wild dancing lines of her eyes behind the slots of that stone mask, the only part of her not yet ragged with the corrosion of my ever-progressing scourge. If she wants to talk, fine. I'll take anything I can use to break her once and for all. Finally. This is good. This is right. We've always felt safer in the dark, haven't we? Sariana sighs. But you see, there are other worlds than this. Better ones. There are worlds the sun can never reach, never wrap its coils around and strangle and burn everything beautiful out of. Worlds with no chains of sense and structure to hold us apart, to keep us from being fully, forever us. That's why this miserable little place doesn't matter anymore. We carry everything we need from it inside ourselves. Her mask tilts upwards as she looks up to the stars, and the locks of braided hair that make up her hands press together as though in mocking imitation of prayer. I have seen such things, my love, oh, such wonderful things. Things I want so badly to touch and share and become. Yet Sariana's posture of fervent hope slackens as the living effigy of woven hair she uses to represent herself slumps over despondently, then begins to convulse in distress that quickly warps into fury. But wherever we go, whatever we do, we have to do together. And you won't let me. You are an anchor bolted to my heart, and all you ever do is everything you can to drag it out of my chest. Sariana jolts forward, squeezing my shoulders in both hands and wrapping a third arm, sprouted suddenly from her thick fall of hair, around my waist. She stretches out with me as I take a shuddering step back, reflexively jabbing my cane into what should be her chest where it finds no purchase, only digging into a tangle of hair like a pole planted in a swamp. She plays along, though, wailing in agony and throwing herself back as violently as if I'd been a car crashing into her. I'm sorry, she whimpers. Patches of the dark scribbles that form her face drip down her mask like black, sludgy tears. This is just what I've become. What we've made each other. Things so hungry for love that we can't help but bite down on the ones closest to us and gnaw until nothing is left. All I want is for us to be whole. You understand, don't you? Please. You have to. No one else will. I can't change without you. I can't make it anywhere, can't be anything without you. That really doesn't tell me much. Does she want to go somewhere else? Become something else? Go somewhere with me, unite with me somehow, or get rid of me so she can be free of my weight around her ankle. This is the first time she's mentioned anything about these other worlds. Is that something she heard from Isabel's harbinger? It's not like a harbinger to take on someone else's obsession as their own, just like that. The more I think about it, the more I think even she isn't sure what she wants. An idea comes to me. A wild, pointless idea, but one I don't think it hurts me to try. There's a way we can do that. Right now, I say. This would be a lot easier if she could understand anything I said. I put a hand to my chest, reach out to her as if to help her up, then bring it to the other, cupping them over my heart. Give me your heart. We don't have to go through this whole thing. You don't have to do this anymore. And she wouldn't be the first. Yerflum's offering was more symbolic than anything, a choice made when it had no other, but Seriana's already asked for this. Haphazardly, alongside other contradictory things, and no doubt with her own idea of what it would mean and how it should go, but still. Seriana squeaks wordlessly, like she's trying and failing to choke something out through her tears. She twitches her head to one side and stands, staggering this way and that. And laughs. She hugs herself, twisting her limbs into knots, and cackles endlessly into the night. I already know covering my ears won't do a thing to blot out the noise. Idiot. You don't understand at all. You never did. Idiot. Idiot. Finally, she falls silent. She takes a few slow, lurching steps forward, glowering down at me with wide eyes half covered by thick strands of hair. Those scribbled tears keep falling in streams. You cannot do that, she says, her voice low and cold and flat as it's ever been. You cannot expect me to forget everything you've done to me just like that. Not when I see you the way I do now. I look into you and there is nothing there. I can open up your heart and see that you love nothing. Her hands all scratch desperately at the others, peeling her limbs apart from the fingers up the way I might pick at a cracked cuticle. Is there anything left in there? Any of you to reunite with? Show it to me. Come to me. Give yourself to me. Pour yourself into the cracks you made. Plant seeds beneath my skin so that something beautiful can grow in the ravaged fields you left behind. Break whatever remains of me all over again. And Seriana tears herself apart, ripping her own body into an inside-out knot of splayed hair and raw flesh, all emanating from a gaping hole in the world that pants out humid waves of putrid breath. Fall into me of your own free will, she says without saying. Fall and never come out. And what happens then, in her mind? Where do we go? Do either of us ever leave that pit? I remember what Seriana named herself. What she first said to me. I don't think I could ever forget anything spoken in that language. You cannot be happy. I cannot be happy. No end goal, no way out. Seriana is fundamentally not like the other harbingers I've killed. They had dreams. Goals bigger than the world they were doing everything they could to bring into being. I still don't understand Irakia, but I felt enough of its desperate yearning to be anywhere but where it was to include it among them. And the ones I fully absorbed. Yerflum's dream was insane, yes, but it was clear what it wanted and why. There's even ways I can imagine it growing into something that kind of made sense, if it hadn't seen suffering as a goal in itself. Maybe a person with its outlook could have developed some sort of palliative care magic, which I never would have liked, but ending death or even disease for everyone are dreams so wild I'd have no idea where to start with them. As long as there are humans getting sick and dying, someone needs to ease their pain as best they can. And Alunla, there was nothing wrong with what Alunla and Isabel wanted for themselves except the price they were willing to make others pay for it. Given what I've done to people and let them do, I hardly have the high ground there. The only difference between us isn't much of one at all. My feeling bad about it changes nothing for the people I've hurt. Or the woman I left to die without ever knowing she existed. What does Seriana want? What would a world where she won look like? A perfect match where she and one other victim torture each other in just the right ways for eternity. This nightmare she lives in, this play she's acted out over and over, it's all she has. All she is. It's sad, it's pathetic, but in one strange, sick way, it's for the best. Because this time, everyone will be happier when Sariana is gone. Even Sariana.